The CEO's hand trembled as she stared at the screen. Every door in the building had unlocked simultaneously. Classified files were spilling into public servers. And the only person who could stop it was the man she'd fired 12 hours ago, a janitor she'd never bothered to really see. Welcome to the story of Vivian Sterling, a woman who built an empire but couldn't recognize the genius cleaning her floors. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all started to fall apart. The fluorescent lights in Vivian Sterling's corner office cast everything in the kind of cold, sterile glow that made million-dollar deals feel clinical. She liked it that way. Emotions were messy. Numbers were clean. At precisely 9 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, she sat behind her glass desk. Imported, minimalist, deliberately intimidating, reviewing termination paperwork. Budget cuts. The board had been breathing down her neck for weeks about operational costs. She'd already slashed the marketing team by 15%. Now it was facilities' turn. Her assistant, Marcus, knocked twice before entering. He always knocked twice. Once felt tentative. 3 times felt desperate. 2 was professional. "The maintenance supervisor is here," Marcus said, adjusting his tablet against his chest. "Send him in." But it wasn't the supervisor who walked through the door. It was someone else entirely. A man she'd probably seen 100 times without actually seeing him at all. Noah Bennett looked exactly like what he was. Exhausted. His maintenance uniform was clean but faded from too many industrial washes. His backpack, one of those cheap canvas things college kids bought at discount stores, hung off one shoulder. He had the kind of face that probably smiled easy when life was good, but right now it just looked worn down. "Ms. Sterling," his voice was quiet. Not timid, just measured, like someone who'd learned not to waste energy on volume. Vivian didn't look up from her screen. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming up. This won't take long." She'd done this 43 times in the past 2 years. Terminations were never pleasant, but they were necessary. You couldn't run a multi-billion-dollar operation on sentiment. "I'll be direct," she continued, finally meeting his eyes. They were brown, tired, with the kind of circles underneath that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "We're restructuring the facilities department. Your position is being eliminated." Noah didn't react the way most people did. No anger, no desperation, no bargaining. He just nodded slowly, like he'd already run this scenario through his head and accepted it. "I understand," he said. That should have been the end of it. Clean, professional, done. But something made Vivian keep talking. Maybe it was the lack of reaction, the absence of the drama she'd been bracing for. "You'll receive 2 weeks severance, and your benefits will continue through the end of the month. Marcus will handle the exit paperwork." 2 weeks. Noah said it flat. Not quite a question. "That's standard for your pay grade." For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not anger exactly, but something harder to define. Disappointment, maybe. Or recognition of something he'd always known but hoped wasn't true. "Right, my pay grade." He adjusted the backpack on his shoulder. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian's jaw tightened. This was where it usually went sideways, the desperate pitch, the family sob story, the pleading. She prepared her polite but firm refusal. "Go ahead. Are you planning to run the system update tonight?" That wasn't what she'd expected. Vivian blinked, momentarily thrown off script. "I'm sorry?" "The AI security system. There's a scheduled update at midnight. Are you running it?" "I don't see how that's relevant to—" "Don't run it." Noah's voice was still quiet, but there was an edge to it now, urgency. "Not tonight. Not until someone who understands the underlying architecture can review it." Vivian felt irritation prickle up her spine. She was firing this man, and he was trying to tell her how to run her company? "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your concern, but our IT department is more than capable. Your IT department doesn't know what they're looking at." He stepped forward, just slightly, and Vivian's hand instinctively moved toward the security button under her desk. But Noah stopped, seeming to realize how it looked. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to overstep. I just... That system has layers your team doesn't know exist. If you force an update without accounting for them, it's going to cascade. Everything's going to fail." "And you know this how?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Noah held her gaze for a long moment, and Vivian saw something flicker there, some old pain, some choice made long ago that still cost him. "I just know," he said finally. "Please, just delay it by 1 week. Have someone do a deep audit first." Vivian leaned back in her chair, studying him. This was absurd. A night shift maintenance worker trying to advise her on cybersecurity protocols that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. "Your concern is noted," she said, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. "Marcus will handle your exit." Noah looked at her for another few seconds, and Vivian had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen for the first time in years. Not assessed, not evaluated, but actually seen and found wanting. "Okay," he said quietly. "I hope I'm wrong." He turned and walked out, his footsteps soft on the polished concrete floor. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that should have felt satisfying. It didn't. Vivian shook off the feeling and returned to her screen. She had 12 more meetings before lunch, a conference call with Singapore at 2, and a board presentation to finalize. She didn't have time to second-guess a termination, especially not based on the paranoid warnings of a janitor. By 9:15, she had forgotten all about Noah Bennett. Guac. The rest of the day proceeded with the mechanical efficiency Vivian had spent a decade perfecting. Meetings ran exactly 15 minutes each. She'd trained her staff to front-load information, skip the small talk, make decisions fast. Lunch was a protein shake consumed while reviewing quarterly projections. The Singapore call went well. They were finalizing a partnership that would expand Meridian's AI infrastructure into 3 new markets. By 6 p.m., most of the staff had cleared out. Vivian preferred it this way. The building quiet, just the essential personnel, the hum of servers and HVAC systems providing white noise while she worked. She was deep into spreadsheets when her phone buzzed. Andrew Chen, her chief technology officer. "We're green-lit for the update," he said without preamble. Andrew didn't waste words either, which was one of the reasons she'd promoted him. "Midnight launch, automated rollout, should be complete by 2 a.m. "Any concerns?" Vivian asked, already knowing the answer. "None. We've been testing this for 3 months. It's going to optimize response time by 18% and patch those vulnerability flags the auditors kept harping about." "Perfect. I'll be monitoring from home. Send me the completion notification when it's done." "Will do?" She hung up and returned to her work, but something nagged at the edge of her consciousness. That maintenance guy's warning. The certainty in his voice when he'd said everything would fail. Vivian pulled up the security system architecture on her secondary monitor, skimming through the documentation. Everything looked standard: firewalls, encryption layers, redundancy protocols. The update had been developed by a team of 12 engineers, vetted by external consultants, approved by 3 separate review boards. What could a janitor possibly know that they didn't? She closed the file and shut down her computer. It was nearly 8 p.m. Time to go home, have a glass of wine, maybe actually sleep for once. Oik. Vivian's penthouse was exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that cost more than cars, art that she'd bought because her decorator said it conveyed sophisticated minimalism. She'd lived there for 4 years and it still felt like a hotel. She poured herself a glass of Bordeaux and stood by the window, watching the city lights pulse and shift below. Somewhere down there, Noah Bennett was probably dealing with the logistics of unemployment, updating his resume maybe, figuring out how to explain the gap to his next employer. She didn't let herself feel guilty. Business wasn't charity. You couldn't save everyone. Her phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Andrew. Update initiating in 13 minutes. All systems nominal. Vivian. Acknowledged. She should have gone to bed. Instead, she found herself opening her laptop, pulling up the remote monitoring dashboard for Meridian systems. She watched the clock tick toward midnight, telling herself this was just due diligence. 11:58 p.m., 11:59 p.m., 12 a.m. The update initiated exactly on schedule. On her screen, progress bars began their march toward completion. Everything looked normal, smooth, controlled, exactly as planned, for about 90 seconds. Then the first error message appeared. Just one, a small red flag in a sea of green indicators. Vivian frowned, leaning closer. Then another error, and another. Within 30 seconds, her entire dashboard was lighting up like a Christmas tree from hell. System failures cascading through every level of the network. And then, the one that made her blood run cold. Critical failure, physical security system offline. Her phone rang. Andrew, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We've got a situation." "I can see that. What happened?" "I don't know. The update triggered something, some kind of hidden subroutine we didn't account for. It's like the system is fighting back against itself. Every door in the building just unlocked. Every single one." Vivian was already moving, grabbing her keys, her shoes. "The classified sections?" "Everything. R&D labs, server rooms, executive areas. And it gets worse. The AI is dumping files. Not randomly. It's methodically moving classified data toward public-facing servers. If we don't stop it in the next hour, everything we've built is going to spill into the open internet. I'm on my way. Get every engineer we have into the building. Now." She was in her car before Andrew could respond, tearing through empty streets toward Meridian. The building rose up against the night sky like a monument to her ambition. 47 stories of glass and steel, glowing with the light of thousands of servers running the most advanced AI security system in the private sector. A system that was currently tearing itself apart. Of course. The lobby was chaos. Security personnel rushed between stations, radios crackling with confused chatter. Engineers huddled around laptops, their faces illuminated by screens full of error codes. And over it all, the building itself seemed to have gone insane. Doors opening and closing randomly, lights flickering, the AI's voice coming over speakers in fragments. "Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown initiated. All systems nominal. Critical failure." Andrew met her at the elevator, his shirt untucked, his usually perfect hair standing at odd angles. "Tell me you've made progress," Vivian demanded. "We've isolated it to the core security layer, but we can't shut it down without completely bricking the system. And we can't access the manual overrides because—" He paused, his expression somewhere between baffled and terrified. "Because they don't exist. According to our documentation, there are no manual overrides." "That's impossible. Every system has—" "I know what every system has, but this one doesn't. Or if it does, it's buried so deep in the code that none of our people can find it." Vivian felt something cold settle in her chest. "Show me." They took the stairs. The elevators were operating on random patterns, according to security, climbing to the 7th floor where the main server room hummed behind reinforced walls. Inside, it looked like a command center during a war. 12 engineers, some she recognized and some who must have been pulled from their beds, worked at terminals with the frantic energy of people watching everything fall apart in real time. "Walk me through it," Vivian said. A young engineer named Sarah pulled up a cascade of code on the main display. The update was supposed to integrate with the existing security protocols, standard procedure, but when it initialized, it triggered this. She highlighted a section of code that looked different from everything around it. Older, denser, written in a programming style that didn't match the rest of the system. "What is that?" "We're not entirely sure. It's like a shadow layer running underneath everything we built. Our update collided with it, and now they're fighting each other for control of the system. Every time we try to isolate one, the other compensates." "Who wrote it?" Sarah exchanged glances with the other engineers. "That's the weird part. The code signature is there, but it doesn't match anyone in our current database. The initials are NB. Vivian's mouth went dry. "What?" "NB all through the foundational code. Whoever built this core layer, they buried their signature into the basic architecture." No, that was impossible. The maintenance worker who'd warned her about this exact scenario couldn't possibly have written, "Noah Bennett," Vivian heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. "The signature," she continued, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "It stands for Noah Bennett." Andrew's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "The janitor you fired yesterday?" "This morning," Vivian corrected automatically, her mind racing. "He warned me. Right before he left, he told me not to run the update." "Why would a maintenance worker know anything about—" "Because he's not a maintenance worker." The voice came from the doorway, and everyone turned to see Marcus standing there, holding a tablet, his face pale. "I mean, he is now, but he wasn't always. I just pulled his original employment file, the one from 7 years ago." He handed the tablet to Vivian. She read it twice, unable to process what she was seeing. Noah Bennett, Lead Systems Architect Security. Clearance Level 9, Position, Primary Developer, Meridian AI Security Infrastructure. Hire date, January 2019. Position change, Facilities/Maintenance, November 2021. He built it, Vivian whispered. He built the entire system. Not just built it, Sarah said, pointing at the code on the screen. This isn't just good programming. This is genius-level work. These protection layers, the way they're woven into the foundation, I've never seen anything like it. Whoever wrote this wasn't just creating security protocols. They were building something adaptive, something that could protect itself, which is exactly what it's doing now, Andrew said grimly. Our update is being treated as a threat. The system is defending itself against us. Vivian looked at the chaos around her. Millions of dollars in technology, some of the best minds in cybersecurity, and none of it mattered. Because the one person who understood what they were dealing with was the man she'd dismissed without a second thought. We need him back, she said. It's 1:30 in the morning, Marcus pointed out. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. on Christmas. Find me his address. Now. The address Marcus found led to a neighborhood Vivian hadn't set foot in since, well, ever. Small houses with chain-link fences, cars that had seen better decades, streetlights that flickered more than they glowed. This was where people lived when they worked night shifts and counted pennies and couldn't afford the kind of life Vivian took for granted. She pulled her Tesla up to a modest single-story home with a small porch and a basketball hoop in the driveway. The house was dark except for one window, the kitchen, she guessed, where warm light spilled out into the night. Vivian sat in her car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. What was she even doing here? She was about to knock on the door of a man she'd fired hours ago and ask him to save the company that had just thrown him away. Pride told her to turn around, find another solution, fix this without crawling back to someone she'd deemed expendable. But her building was tearing itself apart, and pride didn't patch security breaches. She got out of the car. The doorbell sounded tired, like everything else on this street. Vivian waited, hearing movement inside, footsteps approaching. The door opened. Noah stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking even more exhausted than he had that morning. Behind him, she could see into the kitchen, a small table covered in medical equipment, IV bags hanging from a portable stand, medication bottles lined up with military precision. Ms. Sterling, Noah said, his voice carefully neutral. It's late. I know, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but the system crashed. It wasn't a question. Vivian nodded. Everything you said would happen is happening. Doors unlocking, files corrupting, the AI is fighting itself, and we can't stop it. My team found your signature in the code, the core layer, the protection protocols. You built them. I did. We need your help. Noah leaned against the doorframe, and Vivian saw the weight he was carrying. Not just tiredness, but something deeper. The bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. You fired me, he said quietly. This morning you looked at me like I was a problem you were solving, a line item you were crossing off. You didn't ask what I did here, what I knew, why I might have been warning you about something important. You just decided I was disposable. I made a mistake. Yeah, you did. From somewhere in the house, Vivian heard a sound, a soft beeping, medical equipment maybe. Noah's expression shifted immediately, his attention pulled away. I have to go, he said. My daughter needs her medication. Please. Vivian hated the desperation in her own voice, but she pushed forward anyway. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I was wrong, but Meridian is falling apart and you're the only person who can fix it. Noah looked at her for a long moment, and Vivian saw something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Not anger, not satisfaction at seeing her humbled. Something sadder. You still don't get it, he said. You're not here because you realized I'm a person worth respecting. You're here because you need something. That's not the same thing. The medical equipment beeped again, more insistent. I really do have to go, Noah said. My daughter, I understand, but Noah... She used his first name deliberately, trying to bridge a gap that felt impossibly wide. People are going to get hurt if this system fails completely. Classified information, government contracts, personal data for thousands of employees. This isn't just about Meridian anymore. He closed his eyes briefly, and Vivian watched him work through something internal, some calculation between what he owed himself and what he owed the world.
"I'll come," he said finally. "But not right now. Mia needs her treatment, and I need to make sure she's stable. I can be there in 2 hours. 2 hours might be too late." "Then you're going to have to hope it's not." His voice was firm now, drawing a line he wouldn't cross. "I walked away from that building once because I had to choose between my career and my daughter. I chose her. I'll always choose her. If that's not acceptable, you're going to have to find someone else."
Vivian opened her mouth to argue, to push, to do what she always did when people set boundaries she didn't like. But something in Noah's expression stopped her. 2 hours, she agreed. "I'll have security waiting for you." Noah nodded and started to close the door, but Vivian spoke again. "Your daughter, is she okay?" For the first time, Noah's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. Not much, just enough for Vivian to see the fear underneath. "She has a heart condition, cardiomyopathy. She needs medication every 6 hours, and sometimes the timing gets rough." He paused. "That's why I worked nights, so I could be home during the day when she needed me." Vivian felt something twist in her chest. Shame, maybe, or the recognition of just how completely she'd misjudged everything. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "Yeah," Noah said quietly. "Me too." The door closed, leaving Vivian standing on a cracked concrete porch in a neighborhood that her GPS had probably never been programmed to visit. Behind her, the city glowed against the night sky, and somewhere in the middle of all that light, her building was tearing itself apart. She got back in her car and drove toward Meridian, her phone already ringing with updates from Andrew, each one worse than the last. The classified files had started their migration toward public servers. They had maybe 90 minutes before everything spilled into the open internet. Federal authorities had been notified and were en route. And the only person who could stop any of it was sitting in a small house across town, administering heart medication to his daughter, with hands that had once written code so elegant it was still protecting systems even his own company didn't understand. Vivian pressed harder on the accelerator, watching the city blur past, and wondered when exactly she'd become the kind of person who could look at genius and see only a janitor. When had she stopped seeing people at all? By the time Vivian got back to Meridian, the situation had degraded from critical to catastrophic. Federal agents in dark suits had cordoned off the building's entrance. News vans were starting to gather across the street. Someone had leaked that something was wrong, and the vultures were circling. Andrew met her in the lobby, his expression grim. "We've got 40 minutes before the first batch of classified files hits public servers. Maybe less. The AI is accelerating. Noah's coming. He'll be here in—" Vivian checked her watch. 90 minutes. "We don't have 90 minutes. Then we buy time. Shut down the external connections. Isolate the servers. I don't care how you do it, but slow this down. If we shut down external connections, we lose the ability to remotely manage half our systems. We could lock ourselves out permanently." "Then we lock ourselves out. It's better than letting everything we've built spill into the public domain." Andrew stared at her for a moment, then nodded and ran back toward the server room. Vivian stood in the lobby, surrounded by chaos, and for the first time in her career felt completely powerless. She'd spent a decade building Meridian into something extraordinary, and it was all unraveling because she'd been too arrogant to listen to a warning from someone she'd decided didn't matter. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Ms. Sterling, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Cybercrime Division. We're outside your building, and we need to talk about containment protocols. If this breach goes public, there are going to be serious legal ramifications." "I understand, Detective. We have someone coming who can fix this." "When?" "Soon." "How soon?" Vivian closed her eyes. "I don't know." There was a pause on the other end. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't know isn't good enough. We need concrete answers, or we're going to have to consider this building a crime scene and evacuate everyone while we bring in federal IT forensics. Please, just give me 2 hours. You have one. After that, this is out of your hands." The line went dead. Vivian looked up at the building she'd poured her life into. 47 stories of glass and steel representing thousands of hours of work, billions in investment, the careers of hundreds of people who'd believed in her vision. All of it hanging by a thread, All of it depended on whether a man she'd fired would show up to save the people who'd thrown him away. She checked her watch again. 83 minutes until Noah said he'd arrive. 60 minutes until the police took over. And somewhere in the building's digital infrastructure, a system designed by genius and protected by love was fighting for its life against an update that never should have run. Vivian walked to the window and stared out at the city, watching early morning traffic start to build, people heading to jobs where they mattered, where they were seen, where their warnings were actually heard. And she waited. 58 minutes left. Vivian stood at the window watching her reflection blur against the city lights, her phone vibrating every 30 seconds with updates that got progressively worse. Behind her, the lobby had transformed into something resembling a disaster relief center. Engineers sprawled across floors with laptops, security personnel manning stations they didn't fully understand, federal agents conferring in tight clusters near the entrance. Marcus appeared at her elbow, tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. Andrew says they've managed to slow the data migration by about 20%. It's buying us time, but not much. How much? Maybe 15 minutes. 20 if we're lucky. Vivian did the math in her head. That gave them 73 minutes total. Noah had said 90. They were going to come up short no matter what. What else? Marcus hesitated, which meant the news was bad. The board has been notified. Richard Caldwell is on his way down. Of course he is. Richard Caldwell was the board member who'd never wanted Vivian in the CEO position to begin with. Old money, old ideas, old grudges about a 30-year-old woman running a company he thought should have gone to someone with the right pedigree and the right chromosomes. He'd been waiting for her to fail since the day she took over. When's he arriving? He's in the building, 10th floor, apparently observing the crisis management. Observing. Vivian felt anger flare hot in her chest. Tell him if he wants to observe something useful, he can watch the engineers actually trying to fix this, instead of hovering like a vulture. I'll phrase that diplomatically. Don't bother. I'll tell him myself. But before she could move, her phone rang again. Not Andrew this time, not Marcus, not another federal agent demanding answers she didn't have. It was Noah. I'm 10 minutes out, he said without preamble. But I need you to do something before I get there. Anything. Stop trying to shut down the external connections. You're making it worse. Vivian felt her stomach drop. Andrew said isolating the servers would slow the breach. Andrew doesn't understand what he's looking at. The system isn't trying to breach itself. It's trying to protect itself from your update. When you cut external connections, you're forcing it into a defensive posture. It thinks it's under attack, so it's dumping everything it considers valuable into what it perceives as safe storage. The public servers, which to the AI look safer than the internal systems you keep trying to shut down. You're essentially teaching it to treat the outside world as a sanctuary and the inside as a threat. Vivian closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every decision she'd made in the past 6 hours pressing down on her shoulders. What do we do? Nothing. Leave it alone, stop trying to fix it, and just let it run until I get there. Noah, the federal agents are going to make this infinitely worse if they start implementing standard containment protocols. This isn't a standard system. Tell them to stand down. They're not going to listen to me at this point. There was a pause on the other end, and Vivian heard something in the background. Traffic noise, the particular echo of a car's interior. Noah was driving, probably faster than he should, racing back to fix a problem he'd warned them about. Then make them listen, Noah said, because if they don't, we're going to lose everything in the next hour, and there won't be anything left for me to save. The line went dead. Vivian turned to Marcus. Get Andrew on the radio. Tell him to stop all containment efforts immediately. But the data migration is going to accelerate if we keep interfering. Noah says we're making it worse. Marcus's expression wavered between relief that someone seemed to know what they were doing and terror at the idea of doing nothing while their systems bled classified information. You're sure about this? No. But I'm sure Noah knows more about this system than anyone else in this building, so we're going to trust him. Marcus nodded and lifted his radio, relaying the message. Within seconds, Andrew's voice crackled back, sharp with disbelief. You want us to do what? Stand down. All of you, stop trying to contain the breach. Vivian, that's insane. We're minutes away from... I know what we're minutes away from, but Noah Bennett is on his way, and he says we're making it worse. So we stop. Now. There was a long silence filled with static and the distant sound of engineers arguing in the background.
"This is your call," Andrew said finally. "But if this goes sideways, it's on you. Everything's already on me. Just do it."
She lowered the radio and found herself face to face with Richard Caldwell. He looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a corporate board member. Silver hair, expensive suit that managed to look both casual and authoritative. The kind of confidence that came from never having to prove yourself because your last name did it for you. "Vivian, quite a mess you've gotten us into." "Richard, I didn't realize you made house calls for operational issues."
"This stopped being an operational issue about 2 hours ago. This is a potential company-ending catastrophe, and as a board member, I have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure appropriate measures are being taken."
Vivian met his eyes, refusing to look away first. "Appropriate measures are being taken. We have the original system architect en route." "You mean the janitor you fired yesterday?" "I mean the genius who built this entire security infrastructure and tried to warn me about this exact scenario." "Yes, him." Richard's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement if it wasn't so condescending. "And you're basing our entire crisis response on the advice of a maintenance worker?" "I'm basing it on the advice of the only person in the world who understands how this system actually works." "Vivian." Richard lowered his voice, stepping closer in that way powerful men did when they wanted to seem reasonable while backing you into a corner. "I understand you're under pressure, but you need to think about optics here. We have federal agents in the building, news crews outside, and a security breach that could expose classified government contracts. Putting our faith in someone we dismissed from employment 24 hours ago doesn't exactly inspire confidence."
"I don't care about optics right now. I care about fixing this. And if he can't, if this Bennett fellow shows up and makes things worse, what then?" Vivian felt something harden in her chest. She'd spent years navigating men like Richard, learning how to translate their concerns about her competence into language they could accept, smoothing over their doubts with data and projections and carefully modulated confidence. She was done doing that.
"Then I'll take responsibility," she said flatly. "But right now in this moment, I'm making the call. We wait for Noah." Richard studied her for a long moment, and Vivian saw him recalculating, weighing whether this was the moment to push for her removal or whether it was smarter to let her fail on her own. "Fine," he said finally, "but I want it on record that I advised against this approach." "Noted. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a company to save." She walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline and anger and the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. Marcus fell into step beside her. That was direct. "He's wanted me gone since day one. At least now we're being honest about it." They took the stairs up to the 7th floor. The elevators were still operating on random patterns, doors opening to empty shafts, security nightmares compounding by the minute. The server room was quieter than before, the frantic energy replaced by an uneasy stillness. Engineers sat at their terminals, watching error messages cascade across screens, doing nothing to stop them. Andrew looked up as Vivian entered, his expression somewhere between relieved and terrified. "It's slowing down," he said. "Since we stopped interfering, the data migration rate has dropped by almost 40%. So Noah was right. Looks like it. But we're still losing files, just slower." Vivian walked to the main display where Sarah had pulled up the system architecture earlier. The code was still there, that distinctive layer of protection protocols running underneath everything else, written in a style that didn't match anything modern. "Tell me about him," she said. "Noah, when he worked here before, what was he like?" Sarah looked up from her terminal, surprised by the question. "I wasn't here then, but I pulled some of the old project notes while we were waiting. The documentation is sparse, but what's there is..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Obsessive. In a good way. Like every function has comments explaining not just what it does, but why it does it that way. Every security layer has redundancies and fallbacks built in. Whoever wrote this code cared about it surviving. Did the notes say why he left? Why he went from lead architect to maintenance? No, just a notation that he requested a position transfer in November 2021. It was approved without explanation." November 2021. Vivian pulled out her phone, searching for news from that period, anything that might explain the timeline. It took her 3 searches before she found it. A small obituary in the local paper. Emily Rose Bennett, 29, passed away November 14th, 2021, after a brief illness. Survived by her husband Noah and daughter Mia, age 4. Vivian felt something cold settle in her stomach. Noah hadn't just transferred positions. He'd lost his wife and been left to raise a sick daughter alone. And instead of taking time off, instead of falling apart the way anyone would have been entitled to, he'd quietly shifted to a night position so he could be home during the day. And he'd kept working, kept showing up, kept maintaining the systems he'd built, even though no one knew who he really was anymore. "Ms. Sterling?" Marcus's voice cut through her thoughts. "Noah's here." Vivian turned to see Noah standing in the doorway of the server room, backpack still on his shoulder, looking exactly like he had that morning in her office. Tired, understated, easy to overlook. But she saw him differently now. "Thank you for coming," she said. Noah nodded, his eyes already scanning the room, taking in the displays, the error messages, the controlled chaos. "How long has it been since you stopped interfering?" 12 minutes.
"Good. That's good." He set his backpack down and moved to one of the terminals, his fingers already moving across the keyboard with the kind of muscle memory that spoke of thousands of hours spent in this exact space. "The system's in defensive mode. It's going to take some time to convince it we're not a threat." Andrew stepped forward. "We tried accessing the manual overrides, but we couldn't find them in the documentation."
"That's because they're not in the documentation." Noah was typing fast now, code scrolling across his screen in patterns Vivian couldn't follow. "I buried them 3 layers deep and encrypted them with a key that changes based on real-time environmental variables. It was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of scenario, someone forcing an update without understanding the underlying architecture." "You're saying you built in a safeguard against us updating our own system?" "I built in a safeguard against anyone updating the system without proper authorization. Unfortunately, that includes you." Sarah moved closer, watching Noah's screen. That's adaptive encryption. I've read papers about the theory, but I've never seen it implemented in production code." "It's the only way to make the system truly self-protecting," Noah said, not looking up from his work. "Standard encryption can be cracked, given enough time and processing power. But if the encryption key is constantly changing based on environmental factors that can't be predicted or replicated, it becomes effectively unbreakable." "Unless you're the one who designed it." "Unless you're the one who designed it," Noah agreed. His fingers paused over the keyboard. "I'm in, but the system's still treating me as a potential threat because I'm accessing from a terminal that wasn't here when I left. I need to authenticate through the original development machine." "Which is where?" "Sublevel 2. The old secure development lab." Andrew and Sarah exchanged glances. "Sublevel 2 has been closed for renovations for the past year," Andrew said. "All the equipment was supposed to be moved to the new facility on 16 Misk. Was my original machine moved? I don't know. I'd have to check the inventory logs." Noah's expression tightened. "We don't have time for inventory logs. I need someone to take me down there now." Vivian stepped forward. "I'll take you." "Ms. Sterling, the sublevels aren't exactly... I said I'll take him. Marcus, find us access keys for sublevel 2. Andrew, keep monitoring the system status. If anything changes, call me immediately." She didn't wait for confirmation, just headed for the door. Noah grabbed his backpack and followed, and they moved through the building in silence, taking stairs that got progressively less maintained as they descended. The floors above were all glass and polish and modern design. Down here, it was concrete and exposed pipes and the kind of utilitarian architecture that reminded you buildings were just containers for people. Nothing more. "I'm sorry," Vivian said as they reached the landing for sublevel 1. "About your wife." Noah's step hitched slightly, but he kept moving. "How'd you find out?" "I looked it up, after Sarah mentioned when you transferred positions." "So you did the math?" "Yeah, I did the math." They reached the door to sublevel 2. Vivian swiped the access key Marcus had sent to her phone, and the lock clicked open. "I can't imagine what that must have been like, losing her and having to keep going for your daughter." Noah pulled open the heavy door, and they stepped into a corridor that smelled like dust and disuse. "You don't really have a choice. Mia needed me. Needs me. So you keep going because the alternative is falling apart, and you can't afford to fall apart when someone's depending on you. They walked past empty offices and storage rooms, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The emergency lighting was dim, casting everything in shades of gray. "Why maintenance?" Vivian asked. "You could have taken a leave of absence, come back when you were ready. The company would have held your position." "Would you have?" The question landed harder than Vivian expected. "I'd like to think so. Maybe. But I couldn't risk it. Mia's medical bills were piling up. Insurance only covered so much, and I needed steady income with a schedule I could control. Maintenance gave me that. Night shift meant I could be home during the day for doctor's appointments and medication schedules and all the 100 little things that come with raising a kid with a chronic condition." "But you gave up everything you'd built here." Noah stopped in front of a door marked Development Lab 2B, authorized personnel only. He pulled out a key, an actual physical key, old-fashioned and worn, from his pocket. "I gave up a title and a salary," he said. "I didn't give up the work. I still kept the systems running, still monitored for vulnerabilities, still made sure the protection layers were holding. I just did it from a different position." He slid the key into the lock. "Turns out you don't need a fancy office to care about something you built." The lock turned, the door swung open on hinges that squealed from lack of use. Inside, the lab looked like something from a time capsule. Older equipment, multiple monitors arranged in a semicircle around a central workstation, whiteboard still covered in equations and diagrams written in faded marker. And in the center of it all, a custom-built machine that looked nothing like the sleek modern equipment upstairs. This was a developer's rig, cobbled together from high-end components, cables running in organized chaos, cooling fans that hummed to life as Noah hit the power button. "I can't believe they left it here," Noah murmured, watching the boot sequence scroll across the screen. Andrew said the renovation kept getting delayed. Budget issues. Lucky break for us. Noah sat down in the chair. It adjusted to him automatically, like it remembered his body, and pulled the keyboard closer. His fingers moved across the keys with the kind of unconscious precision that made Vivian think of concert pianists, that muscle memory that went deeper than thought. Code appeared on the screen, line after line of it, and Noah's expression shifted into something like recognition, like seeing an old friend after years apart. "There you are," he said softly. "The system?" "The authentication layer. It's checking my credentials, making sure I'm really me, and not someone pretending." He typed a series of commands that meant nothing to Vivian, but seemed to satisfy whatever digital intelligence was evaluating him. "Okay, I'm in. Full access restored." "Can you stop the data migration?" "I can. But first, I need to understand why the system reacted so violently to your update. The protection protocols were designed to be adaptive, not aggressive. Something spooked it beyond normal threat parameters." His fingers moved across the keys, pulling up layers of code and system logs, scrolling through data faster than Vivian could process. She found herself studying him instead. The concentration on his face, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes tracked information with the kind of focus that spoke of genuine expertise. This was what she'd missed, not just the skills, but the care. Noah didn't look at the code like it was a problem to solve. He looked at it like it was something alive that needed understanding. "There," he said suddenly. "Your update included a patch for the quantum encryption module." "Is that bad?" "It would have been fine if the module existed, but it doesn't. Someone on your development team assumed we were using quantum encryption because that's industry standard now, and they wrote a patch for hardware we don't have. When the update tried to implement it, the system saw an attempt to access non-existent architecture and interpreted it as a sophisticated intrusion attempt. So it defended itself." "Exactly. By dumping all critical data to what it perceived as secure external storage, your public servers, and locking down internal access to prevent the intruder from stealing anything important." Noah was typing again, his voice taking on that particular tone people got when they were working and talking simultaneously. "It's actually kind of brilliant. The system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It protected the data from what it thought was a threat, even though the threat was us. Even though the threat was you." Vivian watched as Noah navigated through code that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all she could understand. "Can you teach me what you're doing?" Noah glanced at her, surprised. "Why would you want to know?" Because I fired the person who built this system without bothering to understand what he'd built. I don't want to make that mistake again. Something shifted in Noah's expression. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe a crack in the wall between them. Okay, see this layer here? He pointed to a section of code highlighted on the screen. This is the core authentication protocol. It's checking 3 things simultaneously: who I am, whether I have legitimate access, and whether the environment I'm accessing from matches expected parameters. All 3 have to align, or the system stays locked. And they align for you because I'm accessing from the original development machine using credentials that were hard-coded into the foundation in an environment the system recognizes as safe. It's like, imagine you had a house with a lock that didn't just check if the key fit, but also verified the person using the key was supposed to be there at that time of day, coming from an expected direction with the right intentions. That's possible? In code, almost anything's possible if you're willing to make it complicated enough. Noah's fingers paused over the keyboard. The question is whether the complication serves a purpose. In this case, it does. This system is protecting government-classified information, financial data for thousands of clients, and proprietary research worth billions. Standard security wasn't good enough. So you built something better. I built something different. Better depends on your perspective. He pulled up another screen, this one showing the data migration in real time. The rate had slowed to almost nothing, files trickling toward the public servers instead of flooding. Okay, I'm going to start the rollback sequence. It's going to take about 15 minutes to reverse what the update did, and during that time, the system is going to be vulnerable. We need your team standing by in case something tries to exploit the window. Vivian pulled out her phone and called Andrew. We're starting the fix. Noah says we'll have a 15-minute vulnerability window. I need you ready to respond to any external threats. Copy that. We'll be monitoring. She hung up and turned back to Noah, who was already initiating the sequence. On the screen, progress bars began their slow march toward completion. What happens if this doesn't work? Vivian asked. Then we're having this conversation for nothing, and the system crashes completely. Noah said it matter-of-factly, like he was describing the weather. But it'll work. I designed these rollback protocols specifically for situations like this. You planned for your own company forcing an incompatible update. I planned for every scenario I could think of, including the ones where I wasn't around anymore to fix things. He leaned back in the chair, eyes still on the screen. When you build something that's supposed to last, you have to assume you won't be there to maintain it. You build in redundancies and fallbacks and ways for the system to heal itself. But it needed you anyway, because sometimes even the best planning runs into scenarios you didn't anticipate, like a CEO who doesn't listen to warnings from janitors. It was the first time Noah had directly called out what happened, and Vivian felt the words land like a punch. I'm sorry, she said, for this morning, for not listening, for not seeing you. Noah didn't respond immediately, just watched the progress bars creep forward. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. You know what the hardest part was? Not getting fired. I've been fired before it happens. But the way you looked at me when I tried to warn you, like my opinion was an annoyance you had to tolerate before you could get back to important things. Like I was wasting your time by existing in your space. Noah, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you asked me to teach you, and this is part of the lesson. The people you don't see are still people. The ones cleaning your floors, maintaining your systems, doing the work you don't think about. They all have expertise and experience, and things they could teach you if you bothered to ask. You're right. I know I'm right. The question is whether you'll remember that tomorrow, next week, next year, when there's another budget cut and another list of positions to eliminate. Noah's attention shifted back to the screen. We're at the halfway point. 7 more minutes. Vivian's phone buzzed. Andrew. We've got movement. Someone's probing our external defenses. Not sophisticated, probably opportunistic hackers who saw the news coverage and decided to try their luck. Can you handle it? For now. But if they get more aggressive during the vulnerability window, they won't. Noah's got this. She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. The next 7 minutes felt like hours. Vivian watched the progress bars, watched Noah's face for any sign of concern, watched her phone for updates from Andrew. The building around them was silent except for the hum of the old machine and the distant sound of HVAC systems cycling air through forgotten corridors. At 6 minutes, one of the progress bars stuttered, hung for a moment that felt eternal, then continued. At 4 minutes, Noah's fingers moved across the keyboard, typing commands Vivian didn't understand. His expression focused, but not panicked. At 2 minutes, her phone buzzed again. Federal agent asking for status update. She ignored it. At 1 minute, Noah said, "Here we go." The progress bars hit 100% simultaneously, and the screen flooded with green text. Confirmation messages, system checks, verification protocols, all reporting successful completion. Noah let out a breath he'd probably been holding for the past 15 minutes. "We're good. The rollback is complete. Data migration has stopped, files are being returned to proper storage, and the system is reverting to stable configuration." Vivian felt something unknot in her chest, relief so intense it was almost painful. It's over? The immediate crisis is over, but someone's going to need to go through that update code with a microscope and figure out how the quantum encryption patch got included in the first place. And your team needs training on the actual architecture of this system so they don't make the same mistake again. Will you do it, the training? Noah looked at her, really looked at her, and Vivian saw the exhaustion underneath everything else. Not just from tonight, but from years of carrying too much alone. "Maybe," he said, "but not right now. Right now I need to go home and make sure my daughter's okay, and then I need about 12 hours of sleep. Of course. Whatever you need." Vivian hesitated, then pushed forward. "Noah, I want you to come back. Not as maintenance, as lead architect again. Full restoration of your previous position, salary, benefits, everything. I appreciate that. But I can't work the same hours I used to. Mia needs whatever schedule works for you, whatever support you need for Mia's medical care. We'll make it work." Noah studied her face, looking for something. Sincerity maybe, or proof that this wasn't just crisis-driven promises that would evaporate once things stabilized. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But right now I really need to get home." They shut down the old development machine and made their way back through the sublevels, up the stairs, into the main building where word of the successful rollback had already spread. Engineers were celebrating, federal agents were making phone calls, Marcus was probably updating the board. At the entrance, Noah paused. "For what it's worth, you're not a terrible person. You're just someone who got used to looking at spreadsheets instead of people. It happens a lot at the top. That's not an excuse." "No, it's not. But it's an explanation. And sometimes understanding why we make mistakes is the first step toward not making them again." He walked out into the early morning light, backpack over his shoulder, heading toward a car that had seen better years and a home where someone was waiting for him. Vivian watched him go, standing in the lobby of the building she'd almost lost, surrounded by the wreckage of a crisis she'd caused by not listening. Richard Caldwell appeared at her elbow. "Well, I suppose we avoided disaster after all." "We avoided it because Noah Bennett fixed what we broke." "Yes. Lucky he was available." Richard's tone suggested he thought it was anything but luck. "The board will want a full debrief on this incident. 9 a.m. tomorrow." "Fine." "And Vivian, this conversation about your leadership decisions isn't over." She turned to face him fully. "Good. Because I have some things I want to say about how this company values its employees. Starting with the fact that we had a genius maintaining our floors because we didn't bother to ask what he was capable of." Richard's expression hardened. "This isn't the time for philosophical discussions about corporate culture." "When is the time, Richard? After the next crisis? After we lose the next person who could have saved us?" Vivian felt something shift inside her, some tolerance for bullshit that had finally reached its breaking point. "We're having this conversation tomorrow, all of it. And if the board doesn't like where it goes, they're welcome to find a new CEO." She walked away before he could respond, heading toward the elevators that were finally working properly again, leaving Richard standing in the lobby, looking like a man who'd expected victory and found himself on uncertain ground instead. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Made it home. Mia's stable. Thank you for listening when it mattered." Noah Vivian stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you for saving us when you had every reason not to." The response came quickly. "That's the difference between you and me. You see reasons not to help. I see reasons to try anyway."
She read it 3 times, standing alone in the elevator as it carried her back up toward the office where she'd fired a genius without seeing him. The city spreading out below through windows that reflected nothing but her own face looking back. The sun was rising over the skyline, turning glass towers golden, and Vivian Sterling realized she'd spent years building an empire without understanding the foundation it stood on. Tomorrow, she'd start fixing that. Tonight, she just stood there, watching the city wake up, holding a phone with a message from someone who'd taught her more in 12 hours than she'd learned in a decade of success. Vivian didn't sleep. She went home, stood in the shower until the water ran cold, changed into fresh clothes, and drove back to Meridian as the city's morning rush began clogging the arteries of downtown. Her reflection in the rear-view mirror looked hollow, dark circles under her eyes, hair still damp, the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than one sleepless night. The building looked normal from the outside. No news vans, no federal agents, no visible evidence of the chaos that had nearly destroyed everything just hours ago. But Vivian knew better now. Normal was a surface. What mattered was what ran underneath. Marcus met her in the lobby with coffee and a tablet full of messages. The board meeting's been moved up to 7:30. Richard's insistence. Of course it has. Vivian took the coffee, burning her tongue on the first sip. What's the temperature? Cold. Half the board thinks you should resign. The other half thinks you should be fired. And Richard? Richard thinks both, preferably simultaneously and with maximum humiliation. Vivian felt a laugh bubble up that had nothing to do with humor. Well, at least we know where we stand. They rode the elevator in silence. Vivian watched the floor numbers tick upward, thinking about Noah in his small house, probably making breakfast for Mia right now, checking medication schedules, being present for someone who needed him. She wondered when she'd last been truly present for anything that wasn't a quarterly earnings report. The boardroom occupied the entire 47th floor, glass walls on 3 sides, a table that could seat 30, chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. 9 board members were already seated when Vivian entered, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed satisfaction at her impending downfall. Richard sat at the far end, perfectly composed, his silver hair catching the morning light like some kind of corporate angel ready to deliver judgment. Vivian, thank you for joining us on such short notice. Like I had a choice. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's begin. Last night, Meridian experienced what I'm told was a catastrophic system failure that required emergency intervention from a former employee you had terminated just hours earlier. I think we all deserve an explanation. Vivian set her coffee down and remained standing. If they were going to do this, she'd do it on her feet. The failure occurred because we forced a system update without properly understanding the underlying architecture. The update included a patch for hardware we don't have, which triggered defensive protocols that began migrating classified data to what the system perceived as safe storage, our public servers. If we hadn't stopped it, we would have lost everything. And who exactly stopped it? This from Patricia Wong, the board member who ran a venture capital firm and had a reputation for asking questions she already knew the answers to. Noah Bennett, the man I fired Tuesday morning, the maintenance worker, the lead architect who built our entire security infrastructure 7 years ago and has been maintaining it ever since, even after he transferred to a lower position to care for his daughter. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. And you didn't know this when you terminated him? No, I didn't bother to look past his current job title. The admission landed in the room like a stone in still water. Several board members shifted in their seats. Richard leaned forward. So, to be clear, you fired the one person who understood our most critical systems, ignored his warning about the update, proceeded anyway, and then had to beg him to come back and fix the disaster you created? Yes. And you think that demonstrates the kind of leadership this company needs? Vivian met his eyes. No. I think it demonstrates exactly the kind of leadership this company doesn't need, which is why I'm proposing we change how we operate, starting immediately. Richard's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. I'm sorry? You asked for an explanation. I'm giving you one, along with a plan to ensure this never happens again. Vivian pulled out her tablet, connecting it to the room's display system. Last night exposed fundamental problems with how Meridian values its employees.
We have a culture that prioritizes credentials over competence, titles over talent, and cost reduction over critical thinking. That ends now. She pulled up a presentation she'd built in the car on the way over. Rough, unpolished, but real. First, we're implementing mandatory cross-departmental reviews before any termination. No one gets fired without at least 3 people from different departments weighing in on their actual contributions to the company, not just their position on an org chart. That's going to slow down operational efficiency, Richard objected. Good. Efficiency that doesn't account for expertise is just speed toward disaster. Second, we're creating a technical advisory board with representation from every level of the company, not just executives and department heads, but the people actually doing the work. They get consulted on major system changes before implementation. Patricia was making notes on her tablet. What happens when they disagree with executive decisions? Then we figure out why and address it. Novel concept, I know. Listening to people who understand what they're talking about. This sounds expensive, another board member said. Harrison Kim, finance background, never saw a budget he didn't want to cut. You know what's expensive? Nearly losing our entire classified database because we didn't want to pay attention to a warning from someone making $14 an hour. You know what else is expensive? The lawsuit we're about to face from the federal government for the security breach, the loss of client confidence, the damage to our reputation, and the inevitable investigation into our operational practices. Vivian pulled up a financial projection on the screen. I had Marcus run the numbers this morning. The cost of implementing these changes is roughly $12 million annually. The cost of last night's crisis, if Noah hadn't fixed it, would have been somewhere north of $2 billion. The room went quiet. Numbers had a way of doing that. Third, Vivian continued, Noah Bennett comes back as chief security architect with a compensation package that reflects his actual value to this company, not his previous position. And I want it written into his contract that he has final say on any security updates, with the authority to delay or cancel implementations if he sees problems. You're proposing we give a former janitor veto power over company operations? Richard's voice dripped with disdain. I'm proposing we give the man who built our most critical systems the authority to protect them. His job title 3 years ago is irrelevant. And if he says no, if he doesn't want to come back, that was the question Vivian had been avoiding since she'd left Noah standing in the lobby at dawn. Then we've lost the best security architect in the industry because we treated him like he was disposable, and we'll deserve everything that comes after. Richard stood up, his chair scraping against the polished floor. This is absurd. You're asking us to restructure our entire operational philosophy based on one crisis that you caused in the first place. I'm asking you to learn from a mistake before it becomes a pattern. But if you'd rather use this as an excuse to replace me, go ahead. Vote me out. I'll be gone by noon. Vivian looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. But whoever you bring in next is going to face the same fundamental problem. Meridian has spent years optimizing for profit, without understanding what makes that profit possible. We've been so focused on the numbers that we forgot about the people behind them. Spare us the inspirational speech, Richard said. This is business, not a charity. You're right, it's business, which means we should be smart enough to recognize when we're about to lose a competitive advantage because we're too proud to admit we screwed up. Vivian switched the display to show Noah's original employment contract from 7 years ago. When we hired Noah Bennett, we paid him $220,000 a year plus benefits. He designed a security system that's protected billions in assets and survived threats our current team can't even identify. After his wife died, he took a position making $38,000 a year so he could be home for his daughter, and we let him because it was convenient and cheap, and we didn't bother to ask what we were losing. Patricia looked up from her notes. What are you proposing we pay him now? $400,000 base plus performance bonuses tied to system stability and security metrics. Full medical coverage with no caps for his daughter's treatment. Flexible schedule with protected time for family obligations. And a formal apology from this board for how we've treated him. An apology? Richard laughed, sharp and bitter. We're going to apologize to an employee for running our business? We're going to apologize to a human being for treating him like he didn't matter. Vivian shut down the presentation. But that's your call. Vote however you want. Fire me if that makes you feel better. Just know that if I walk out of here, the first thing I'm doing is calling Noah and telling him not to come back because this company doesn't deserve him." She sat down, her heart pounding, waiting for the response. The silence stretched out, broken only by the hum of the building's climate control and the distant sound of traffic 47 floors below. Finally, Patricia spoke. "I want to meet him, this architect of yours. Before we make any decisions, I want a conversation with Noah Bennett about what he actually built and what it would take to maintain it properly." "I can arrange that. So can I," Richard cut in. "In fact, I think the entire board should be part of that conversation. Let's see if this man is the genius Vivian claims or just someone who got lucky once." Vivian felt anger flash hot in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "He's not a performing monkey, Richard. And he doesn't owe us anything, especially not a performance to justify his existence. Then how do we know we're not throwing money at a problem that doesn't exist? Because the problem does exist. It existed yesterday when I fired him, and it's going to keep existing until we fundamentally change how we see people in this company." Vivian stood up again, too restless to sit. "But fine. If you want to meet Noah, ask him yourself. I'll give you his number. Call him up, schedule a meeting, see if he's willing to waste his time convincing a room full of executives that he's worth listening to. My guess is he'll tell you to go to hell, because unlike me, he's figured out that his value doesn't depend on your approval." She walked toward the door, done with the conversation, done with defending basic human decency to people who saw everything through spreadsheets. "Where are you going?" Richard demanded. "To my office. You all know where to find me when you've decided whether I still work here." The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt nothing like the satisfaction she'd expected. Vivian made it to the elevator before her hands started shaking, made it to her office before the exhaustion hit like a physical weight. Marcus was waiting with more coffee and a concerned expression. "How bad was it?" "I either just saved my job or ended my career. Won't know which until they vote." "What are the odds?" "Honestly, I have no idea." Vivian sank into her chair, staring at the desk where she'd signed Noah's termination paperwork just yesterday. "Did you get me Noah's number?" "Already in your contacts. You want me to call him?" "No, I should do it." She picked up her phone, stared at the screen, put it down again. "What do I even say? Hi, remember how I fired you? Well, the board wants to interview you like you're applying for your own job again. Maybe start with asking how his daughter is." Vivian looked up, surprised. "You know about Mia?" "I looked up his file after last night. Seemed relevant." Marcus set the coffee down gently. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing in there. The board needed to hear it. Even if it cost me my job?" "Especially if it costs you your job. Means you actually meant it." After Marcus left, Vivian sat alone in the office that had defined her identity for years, looking out at a city that didn't care about corporate drama or board meetings or the small human moments that got crushed under the weight of quarterly projections. She picked up her phone and dialed before she could overthink it. Noah answered on the third ring, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Vivian, did I wake you?" "No, just got Mia settled for a nap. Everything okay with the systems?" "Yeah, they're holding. Andrew's team is monitoring, but everything looks stable." She paused, trying to find words that didn't sound like corporate manipulation. "How's Mia doing?" There was a long silence on the other end, and Vivian wondered if she'd crossed some line, asked something too personal, pushed into space she hadn't earned the right to occupy. "She's okay," Noah said finally. "Tired from the night routine, but her levels are good. Thanks for asking." "Noah, I need to talk to you about something. The board wants to meet you." "To offer me my job back?" "To decide whether to offer you your job back. Richard Caldwell wants to interview you, verify that you're actually capable of what I said you are." Another silence, longer this time. When Noah spoke again, his voice had gone flat. "So I'd have to audition, prove myself to a room full of people who didn't notice I existed for 3 years. I know how it sounds. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want me to perform for executives who watched you fire me without question and are now questioning whether I'm worth hiring back. That about right?" "Yes." At least she could be honest about it. Noah laughed, bitter and tired. "You know what the funny thing is? I expected this. When you showed up at my door last night, I knew it was only a matter of time before the reality set in. The emergency would pass, things would go back to normal, and I'd be right back where I started, trying to convince people that I know what I'm talking about despite not having the right credentials or the right pedigree or whatever else they use to measure worth. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. But here's the thing, Vivian. I'm tired. I'm tired of proving myself to people who should have been paying attention in the first place. I'm tired of watching my expertise get questioned by people who couldn't build what I built in 1,000 years. And I'm really tired of companies that only value people when they're useful. So you're saying no. I'm saying I need to think about it, and I need you to be honest with me about what you actually want. Do you want me back because you recognize that you made a mistake and you're trying to fix it? Or do you want me back because I'm useful and having me around makes your life easier? Vivian opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The question deserved more than a reflexive response. I don't know, she admitted. I think it started as the second thing, and I'm trying to make it the first thing, but you're right that I didn't see you until I needed you, and that's not enough. No, it's not. Noah's voice softened slightly. But at least you're being honest about it. That's more than most people would give me. What would it take? For you to consider coming back? Besides the apology Richard Caldwell is never going to give me? A pause, and Vivian heard something in the background, Mia's voice, small and sleepy, asking for water. Hold on. She waited, listening to the sounds of Noah moving through his house, water running, quiet murmurs as he talked to his daughter. Normal life, the kind that happened in spaces Vivian had forgotten existed outside of work. Noah came back on the line. Sorry, where were we? You were about to tell me what it would take. Right. Honestly, I don't know if there's an offer good enough. It's not about money, though money matters when you've got medical bills that could choke a horse. It's about whether I can trust that the next time there's a budget cut or a restructuring or whatever corporate euphemism you want to use, I won't be back on a list of expendable positions. I can't guarantee that won't happen. I know. No one can. But I can guarantee that if I come back and it happens again, I won't be there to fix it a third time. I'm done being the person who saves companies that don't value me until disaster strikes. Vivian thought about the board meeting, Richard's contempt, Patricia's cautious interest, the votes that were probably being counted right now to determine her own future. What if I'm not there, she asked. The board might fire me today. If they do, would you still consider coming back? To work for Richard Caldwell? Noah laughed again, genuinely this time. Not a chance. That man looked at my code like it was a miracle last night, and he'd still find a way to cut my position if it saved him a decimal point on the quarterly report. So it depends on me staying. It depends on a lot of things. But yeah, you staying is probably one of them. Noah sighed, and Vivian heard the exhaustion underneath. Look, I need to be honest with you about something. Even if you offer me everything I asked for, the salary, the benefits, the authority, there's still a part of me that wants to tell you to figure it out yourself. Not because I'm vindictive, but because walking away would be easier. Staying means dealing with people who don't respect what I do, fighting the same battles over and over, constantly having to prove that I deserve to be in rooms I built the infrastructure for in the first place. I understand. I don't think you do. But you're trying, and that counts for something. A pause. Give me until tomorrow. Let me talk to Mia's doctors, see what her treatment schedule looks like for the next few months, figure out if this is even logistically possible. Then I'll give you an answer. That's fair? And Vivian? Whatever happens with the board, whatever they decide about your job, you did the right thing this morning, standing up in there and admitting you were wrong. Most executives would have found a way to spin it, blame someone else, make it about system failures instead of leadership failures. You didn't do that. Didn't feel like I had much choice. You always have a choice. You just made a better one than usual. He was quiet for a moment. I have to go. Mia's medication is in 30 minutes, and I need to prep. Okay, thanks for listening. Yeah, thanks for calling. The line went dead, leaving Vivian alone in her office with coffee going cold and a future that felt more uncertain than it had in years. She spent the next 3 hours working through emails, reviewing security reports Andrew had compiled overnight, making notes about system vulnerabilities that Noah had flagged during the crisis. Normal work, the kind that usually consumed her attention completely. It felt hollow now. At 11:15, Marcus knocked and entered without waiting for permission, which meant the news was either very good or very bad. The board voted. Vivian set down her pen. And 7-2 in your favor. You keep your job, conditional on implementing the changes you proposed and successfully bringing Noah Bennett back as chief security architect. So I won by losing control. You won by admitting you didn't have control in the first place. Marcus set a folder on her desk. Official terms are in there. You've got 90 days to show progress on the operational changes and secure Bennett's return. If either fails, the board reserves the right to revisit your position. Vivian opened the folder, scanning the terms. They were harsh but fair. Benchmarks for employee review processes, deadlines for establishing the technical advisory board, metrics for measuring cultural change. And at the bottom, a single line that made everything else irrelevant. Compensation package for Noah Bennett approved as proposed, pending his acceptance. They went for all of it? Patricia convinced them. Said she'd rather pay $400,000 to keep someone who knows our systems than pay millions to rebuild after they fail again. Harrison almost had a stroke over the medical coverage, but even he couldn't argue with the math. Marcus sat down across from her. Richard voted against, obviously. Said you were setting a dangerous precedent by rewarding insubordination. Insubordination, is that what we're calling it when someone tries to warn us about disasters? Richard calls it whatever helps him sleep at night. Marcus pulled out his tablet. Speaking of which, he's demanding a formal review of the security protocols once external consultants brought in to verify Bennett's work. Of course he does. The good news is, if Noah's code holds up to external review, which it will, it makes Richard look petty and you look justified. The bad news is, it's going to take time and money, and Noah's going to hate every second of having his work questioned. Vivian leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling tiles that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. This job used to be simpler. No, it didn't. You just didn't notice the complications because they were happening to other people. It was the most direct thing Marcus had ever said to her, and Vivian felt it land with the weight of truth. When did you get so honest? Around the time I realized my boss might actually listen if I stopped couching everything in corporate speak. Marcus stood up. You've got a 1:30 with the security team to discuss ongoing monitoring protocols, and Andrew wants 15 minutes sometime today to go over the technical postmortem of last night's crisis. Also, there are about 40 media requests about the incident at Meridian, none of which I've responded to yet. Tell them it was a scheduled maintenance issue that's been resolved. They're not going to buy that. I don't care. The truth is too complicated and involves admitting vulnerabilities I don't want public. Vivian pulled out her phone, looking at Noah's contact information. Cancel my afternoon meetings. I need to go somewhere. Where? To finish a conversation I should have had 3 years ago. She left before Marcus could ask questions, taking the elevator down to the parking garage, climbing into her car without a clear destination in mind. But her hands seemed to know where they were going, steering through downtown traffic toward the neighborhood where houses had chain-link fences and streets that didn't get repaved as often as they should. Noah's car was in the driveway when she pulled up, that old sedan that probably needed work she could now afford to pay for if he'd let her. Vivian sat in her Tesla for a moment, gathering courage for a conversation she hadn't planned. Then she got out and knocked on the door. Noah answered faster this time, like he'd been expecting someone. His expression shifted from neutral to surprised when he saw who it was. Vivian, I said I'd call you tomorrow. I know. I couldn't wait. She looked past him into the house, where she could see Mia sitting at the kitchen table with crayons and paper, drawing something elaborate and colorful. Is this a bad time? It's actually nap time, but someone decided she wasn't tired. Noah glanced back at his daughter, then stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. What's going on? The board voted. I still have my job, contingent on bringing you back and implementing a bunch of operational changes that I probably should have made years ago. Congratulations. It doesn't feel like winning. Vivian leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the street where kids rode bikes and someone was mowing their lawn, and life happened at a pace that didn't require quarterly earnings reports. They approved your compensation package. Everything I proposed. $400,000 base, full medical coverage, flexible schedule, the works. Patricia Wong wants to meet you, but not as an audition. She wants to understand what you built so she can make sure we protect it properly. And Richard? Richard wants external consultants to review your code. Prove that it's actually as good as I say it is. Noah's jaw tightened. Of course he does. I can fight it if you want. Tell him to back off. Trust the internal assessment. No. Let him bring in his consultants. Noah's voice had gone hard. Let them tear apart every line of code I wrote, question every decision I made, try to find flaws in architecture that's been protecting this company for 7 years without a single breach. And when they can't, when they have to admit that it's some of the best security infrastructure they've ever seen, Richard can choke on his own skepticism. That's not going to make him like you any better. I don't need him to like me. I need him to recognize that his opinion of my worth doesn't change the reality of what I'm capable of. Noah looked at her directly, and Vivian saw something she hadn't noticed before. Not anger, but a quiet, unshakable certainty. That's the thing people like Richard never understand. They think respect is something you give or withhold based on credentials and titles and who someone knows. But real respect isn't a gift. It's a recognition of reality. And the reality is, I built something none of them could replicate. And that doesn't change whether they acknowledge it or not. So you're saying yes? You'll come back? I'm saying I'll think about it, which is more than I was willing to say this morning. Noah sat down on the porch steps, and after a moment, Vivian joined him. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why does this matter so much to you? Not the company stuff. I get that you want to fix the security vulnerabilities and protect your position and all that, but why do you care whether I specifically come back? Vivian thought about the question, about all the easy answers she could give. His expertise, the board's requirements, the practical necessity of having someone who understood the systems. But Noah deserved better than easy answers. Because I looked at you yesterday morning and didn't see a person, she said finally. I saw a problem I was solving, a line item I was eliminating, an operational efficiency I was optimizing. And then last night, when everything fell apart, I had to face what that actually meant. I'd thrown away something irreplaceable because I was too arrogant to see its value. I'm not irreplaceable. Everyone is replaceable eventually. Maybe. But you're not replaceable by me or by Andrew or by any of the people we'd hire to fill your position. You built something that requires understanding we don't have, and I threw you away without a second thought. She picked at the peeling paint on the porch railing. I don't want to be the kind of person who does that. And having you come back, working with you, learning from you, that feels like maybe I could become someone different, someone better. Noah was quiet for a long moment, watching a kid across the street try to pop a wheelie on a bike that was slightly too big. That's the most honest thing you've said to me yet. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's a start. He stood up, brushing off his jeans. I need to get back to Mia. Her afternoon medication is in 20 minutes, and she likes to negotiate the timing. Negotiate? A smile flickered across Noah's face, brief but genuine. She's 7. Everything's a negotiation. Yesterday she tried to convince me that ice cream counted as dairy intake, and therefore should be part of her nutritional requirements. What did you tell her? That if she could get her cardiologist to sign off on ice cream as a cardiac medication, I'd buy a whole freezer full. Noah opened the door, and Vivian could see Mia looking up from her drawing, her face lighting up when she saw her father. I'll call you tomorrow with my answer, one way or another. Noah? He paused in the doorway. Thank you for saving us, for listening, for giving me a chance to be better than I was. Don't thank me yet. You haven't actually done better yet. You've just said you want to. Fair enough. The door closed, leaving Vivian standing on a porch that wasn't hers, in a neighborhood that wasn't hers, having a conversation about worth and value with someone she'd almost lost through sheer stupidity. She drove back to Meridian slowly, taking side streets instead of the highway, watching the city change as she moved from one neighborhood to another. Small houses giving way to apartment buildings, then commercial districts, then the glass towers of downtown where people made decisions that affected lives they never saw. Her phone rang as she pulled into the parking garage. Patricia Wong. Vivian, I wanted to follow up on the board meeting. Do you have a minute? Of course. I meant what I said about wanting to meet Noah Bennett, not to interrogate him, to understand what we've been missing. Can you arrange that? I'm working on it. He hasn't committed to coming back yet. Would it help if I talked to him? Board member to potential employee? No Richard Caldwell in the room to make it adversarial? Vivienne considered it. Patricia was direct but fair, respected in the industry, someone whose opinion actually carried weight because she'd earned it rather than inherited it. It might. Let me ask him. Good. And Vivienne, what you said this morning about how we value people, that needed saying. A lot of us have been thinking it for years, but you were the first one willing to put it on the record. Patricia's voice softened slightly. The changes you're proposing won't be easy. There's going to be resistance, both from the board and from people in the company who've gotten comfortable with how things work now. But they're necessary, and I'll support them. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure they actually happen. Talk is easy. Implementation is where most good intentions die. The line went dead, leaving Vivienne alone in a concrete parking structure, surrounded by cars that cost more than most people made in a year, thinking about implementation and good intentions, and the distance between wanting to be better and actually doing better. She took the elevator back up to her office, where Marcus had left a stack of messages and a note that the security team meeting had been rescheduled to tomorrow. The afternoon stretched ahead, empty of obligations, full of time she usually filled with work that suddenly felt less important than it used to. Vivienne pulled out her laptop and started writing. Not emails, not memos, not strategic plans. Just thoughts, questions, observations about what had happened in the past 36 hours, and what it meant for everything that came after. When had she stopped seeing people as people? When had efficiency become more important than expertise? When had she started measuring worth in spreadsheets instead of contributions? The answers didn't come easy, and when they did come, they weren't comfortable. But Vivienne kept writing, kept questioning, kept pushing into spaces she'd avoided for years because it was easier to optimize systems than examine the person running them. Outside her window, the sun moved across the sky, casting shadows that grew and shifted and disappeared as the afternoon wore into evening. The building around her slowly emptied, people heading home to lives that existed independent of quarterly projections and board meetings and the constant pressure to prove that every decision was the right one. Somewhere across town, Noah Bennett was making dinner for his daughter, checking medication schedules, being present for someone who needed him. And Vivienne sat in an office that had once felt like the center of her world, wondering when it had started feeling like a cage instead. Vivienne woke up at her desk to the sound of her phone vibrating against the glass surface. Sunrise was bleeding orange across the city skyline, and her neck ached from falling asleep in her chair. The clock read 6:47 a.m. The notification was from Noah. A text message sent 20 minutes ago. Can we talk? Not about the job. About Mia. Her stomach dropped. She called immediately. Noah answered on the first ring, his voice tight. Hey. What's wrong? Is Mia okay? She's stable, but we had a rough night. Her levels dropped around 3 a.m., and I had to take her to the ER. They got her sorted, ran some tests, adjusted her medication. She's home now, sleeping. Vivienne pressed her hand against her desk, steadying herself against a wave of guilt she had no right to feel. I'm so sorry. Do you need anything? Actually, yeah. I need to understand what I'd be walking into if I came back to Meridian, not the salary stuff, the actual logistics. Because last night, sitting in that hospital room watching monitors beep and doctors confer in whispers, I had a lot of time to think about what kind of life I can actually give Mia. Okay, what do you need to know? If I'm lead architect again, what does that actually look like day to day? Because I can't do 60-hour weeks. I can't be the guy who sleeps in his office during crunch time or flies to conferences on weekends. I need to be home by 5:30 to make dinner, and I need mornings free for medical appointments. And there are going to be nights like last night where I have to drop everything because my daughter's heart is failing. The rawness in his voice made Vivienne's chest hurt. We build around that, whatever you need. You say that now, but what happens when there's a deadline or a crisis or Richard Caldwell decides that my personal life is interfering with operational efficiency? Then Richard can go to hell. Noah laughed, but it sounded exhausted. You can't fight the board every time I need to leave early. Watch me. Vivienne stood up, pacing to the window. The city was waking up below. Delivery trucks, early commuters, people starting days that would intersect with Meridian systems in ways they'd never know. Noah, I'm not asking you to sacrifice your daughter for this company. I'm asking if there's a way to structure this job so you don't have to choose between the two.
I don't think there is. Not really. Every job requires sacrifice, and I've already decided what I'm willing to sacrifice. It's not Mia. Then we figure out what you are willing to sacrifice and build from there. There was a long pause. Vivian heard something in the background, a soft sound, maybe Mia stirring. Hold on, Noah said.
She waited, listening to the muffled sounds of Noah moving through his house, his voice low and gentle as he talked to Mia. The conversation was too quiet to make out words, but the tone was pure comfort, pure presence. After a few minutes, he came back on the line. Sorry, she had a nightmare. Hospitals do that to her. Don't apologize. Take care of her. I am. But I also need to take care of this situation because the ER visit last night cost me $4,000 even with insurance. And I've got another cardiology appointment next week that's probably another $2,000. So as much as I want to tell you that money doesn't matter, it does, which means I need this job, or something like it. The admission seemed to cost him something. Vivian heard the frustration underneath, the anger at a system that forced people to weigh their children's health against financial survival. Then let's make it work, she said. What if you started part-time, 3 days a week, whatever hours work for Mia's schedule? You focus on the critical security infrastructure, train other people to handle day-to-day maintenance, build in redundancies so the whole system doesn't depend on you being available 24/7. Part-time at what salary? Full-time salary. $400,000 prorated isn't enough to cover Mia's medical expenses. You get the full package, regardless of hours. Vivian, that's not sustainable from a business perspective. I don't care. We almost lost everything because we were so focused on sustainable business practices that we forgot about unsustainable human realities. You need financial security to take care of your daughter. We need your expertise to keep our systems running. Those two things aren't in conflict unless we make them be. Noah was quiet for so long that Vivian thought the call had dropped. Why are you doing this? He asked finally. Really? Because this isn't about guilt anymore, and it's not about fixing a mistake. You're offering me things that don't make sense from any rational business standpoint. Because watching you choose between your daughter and your career shouldn't be necessary. Because the system that forces that choice is broken. And because... Vivian stopped, trying to find words for something she was still figuring out herself. Because I spent 10 years optimizing for profit and efficiency, and it made me into someone who could fire a genius without seeing him. I don't want to be that person anymore. Wanting isn't the same as being. I know, but it's a start. She heard Noah exhale slowly. Okay, here's what I need. Part-time schedule, mornings free, full salary and benefits like you said. But I also need it in writing that I can work from home when Mia's having bad days. And I need protected medical leave that doesn't count against vacation time. And I want final authority on security decisions, not subject to board approval, not contingent on Richard's opinion, mine. Done. Just like that? Just like that. I'll have Marcus draw up a contract today. You can have your lawyer review it, negotiate anything that doesn't work. But the core of what you're asking for, that's non-negotiable from my end. You get it, or we don't have a deal. You're going to catch hell from the board for this. Probably, but I caught hell for firing you too, so at least this time the hell is worth it. Another pause, and Vivian could almost hear Noah recalculating, trying to figure out if this was real or just another corporate promise that would evaporate under pressure. When would you want me to start? He asked. Whenever works for you. Next week, next month, whenever Mia's stable enough that you feel comfortable taking it on. Next week's probably too soon. She's got that cardiology appointment, and they're talking about adjusting her medication again, which usually means a rough adjustment period. Noah's voice shifted slightly, less guarded. What about 2 weeks from Monday? That gives me time to get her settled and gives your legal team time to draft something that doesn't fall apart the first time Richard questions it. 2 weeks from Monday works. And Noah? Bring Mia to the office sometime. Let her see where you work, meet some people. We've got a cafeteria that makes pretty good grilled cheese, and the top floor has windows where you can see halfway across the city. She'd like that. She's never really understood what I do, just that Dad goes to the building sometimes and comes home tired. Then let's change that narrative. Dad goes to the building where people respect what he does and come home because his daughter matters more than any deadline. You're really selling this. I'm really trying. Vivian checked her watch. Almost 7:30, which meant Marcus would be arriving soon, along with the rest of the staff and the normal chaos of a workday. I should let you go. You probably need sleep. About 3 years' worth. But I'll settle for a nap after Mia has breakfast. Noah hesitated. Vivian, thank you. For listening, for adjusting, for making this feel like it might actually work. I know I've been difficult about this. You've been honest about it. There's a difference. After they hung up, Vivian stood at the window watching the city fully wake up, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, not triumph or satisfaction or the particular high that came from closing a deal, but something quieter, relief maybe, or hope that she hadn't completely destroyed something worth saving. Marcus arrived at 8 with coffee and a knowing look. You slept here. Accidentally. Fell asleep writing. Writing what? Thoughts, questions. A memo to myself about what kind of leader I want to be versus what kind I've actually been. Vivian took the coffee gratefully. Noah's coming back. 2 weeks from Monday, part-time schedule, full benefits, final authority on security decisions. Marcus pulled out his tablet, already taking notes. Part-time at what percentage? Whatever percentage lets him be home for his daughter. Could be 3 days a week, could be 20 hours total, could vary month to month depending on Mia's medical needs. We accommodate it. The board's going to want more specificity than that. Then the board can learn to live with uncertainty. Not everything fits into neat quarterly projections. Vivian sat down at her desk, pulling up her computer. I need you to draft a contract that protects Noah's schedule flexibility and medical leave without loopholes. Get our best employment lawyer on it, and make sure they understand that if Richard finds a way to exploit the language later, I'm holding them personally responsible. That's not exactly how attorney-client privilege works. I don't care. Make it ironclad. She pulled up her calendar, scanning the week ahead. Also, I want to set up a meeting with Patricia Wong and Noah. Just the three of us, casual, no board oversight, somewhere outside the office where it doesn't feel like an interview. Where were you thinking? I don't know. Coffee shop, restaurant? Somewhere normal people have conversations that don't involve PowerPoint presentations. Marcus made a note. I'll find options. Anything else? Yeah. Start pulling together documentation on our current employee review processes. I want to see exactly how people get evaluated, promoted, terminated, all of it. If we're rebuilding how we value people, I need to understand what we're tearing down first. That's going to take time. We're talking about files going back years. Then we take time. This isn't a quarterly project, Marcus. This is fundamental restructuring of how we operate. Vivian met his eyes. I know it's a lot. I know it's going to be messy and complicated, and there's going to be resistance from people who like how things work now. But it's necessary. Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. Okay, I'll get started. The rest of the morning blurred into meetings. Andrew's technical post-mortem of the crisis. A conference call with their legal team about federal compliance issues. A tense conversation with PR about managing the media narrative around what was now being called the incident. Everyone wanted answers, explanations, assurances that it wouldn't happen again. Vivian gave them what she could, but kept circling back to the same core truth. They'd almost lost everything because they hadn't been paying attention to what actually mattered. No amount of spin could change that. At noon, her phone rang. Unknown number, but something made her answer. Ms. Sterling? This is Dr. Rachel Kim from Children's Memorial Hospital. I'm Mia Bennett's cardiologist. Vivian's heart rate spiked. Is everything okay? Is Mia... Mia's fine. I'm actually calling about her father. Noah mentioned you were his employer and that you were working out a new arrangement for his position. I wanted to reach out because there's some context that might be helpful as you finalize those plans. I'm listening. Mia's condition is serious but manageable with proper medication and monitoring. However, she's going to need a heart transplant within the next 2 to 3 years. We've got her on the waiting list, but the reality is that when a match becomes available, Noah will need to drop everything. We're talking about a surgery that requires weeks of hospital stay, months of recovery, constant parental presence. The words landed like stones. I didn't know it was that serious. Most people don't. Noah's very private about it, and Mia's been stable enough that it doesn't come up in casual conversation. But I wanted you to understand the full picture, because any employment arrangement needs to account for the possibility that Noah might need to effectively disappear for 3 to 6 months with very little notice. He hasn't mentioned the transplant. He probably won't unless you ask directly. He spent 3 years trying to be everything Mia needs while also maintaining some kind of career, and I think he's gotten used to not asking for help. Dr. Kim's voice softened. Look, I don't usually make calls like this, but Noah's a good father dealing with an impossible situation. And if you're offering him legitimate flexibility and support, I want to make sure you understand what that actually means in practical terms. Thank you for telling me. Can I ask, what's Mia's prognosis if she gets the transplant? Good. Better than good, actually. With a successful transplant and proper follow-up care, she could live a completely normal life. But getting there requires Noah being able to focus on her without worrying about losing his job, or his insurance, or his financial stability. That's been the hardest part for him, trying to be present for Mia while also terrified that one missed day of work could cost them everything. After Dr. Kim hung up, Vivian sat staring at her phone, processing information that recontextualized everything. Noah hadn't just been maintaining systems for 3 years while raising a sick daughter. He'd been doing it while waiting for a phone call that could come any day, knowing that when it did, everything else in his life would have to stop. And she'd fired him. Just eliminated his position like it was a line item that didn't matter, never bothering to ask what kind of pressures he was carrying or what his warnings actually meant. She called Marcus. The contract for Noah, add a clause about extended medical leave for family emergencies. No cap on duration, full salary and benefits continuation, guaranteed position to return to when he's ready. And I wanted explicit that if Mia needs a transplant, Noah can take as much time as necessary without any employment consequences. That's extremely generous. It's extremely necessary. His daughter needs a heart transplant sometime in the next few years. When that happens, I want him focused on her, not worried about whether we're going to fire him for being gone too long. The board's going to push back on open-ended medical leave. Then I'll handle the board. Just draft it. She spent the afternoon in meetings that felt increasingly pointless compared to the actual human realities happening outside the conference room walls. Richard Caldwell cornered her after a finance review, his expression calculating. I heard you're finalizing Bennett's contract. You heard correctly. I also heard it includes some rather unusual provisions. Part-time hours at full-time salary, unlimited medical leave, final authority on security decisions. Richard's tone suggested he found all of this deeply offensive. You're setting a precedent that's going to be very difficult to walk back. Good. It should be difficult. Making exceptions for people dealing with sick children shouldn't be easy to undo. It's not about the exception. It's about the message it sends. If we start accommodating every employee's personal circumstances, where does it end? Vivian felt something snap inside her, all the patience she'd been cultivating for board politics evaporating in an instant. It ends when people can do their jobs without choosing between their careers and their families. It ends when we stop treating employees like interchangeable parts and start treating them like human beings with complicated lives. And if that's too radical a concept for you, Richard, maybe you're on the wrong board. Richard's expression hardened. Careful, Vivian. You won 7-2, not unanimously. That margin can shift very quickly if you keep making decisions based on emotion rather than sound business principles. The sound business principle is keeping the person who built our most critical infrastructure. Everything else is just details. She stepped closer, dropping her voice. But let's be honest about what this is really about. You don't like that I'm still CEO. You don't like that I'm making changes you didn't approve, and you really don't like that I'm prioritizing someone's sick kid over your comfort with traditional corporate hierarchy. So either vote me out or get out of my way. But stop pretending this is about business principles when it's really about control. She walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Marcus caught up with her at the elevator. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. But I'm tired of pretending Richard's concern is about anything other than his ego. Vivian pressed the button for the 7th floor. Where are we with the employee review documentation? I've got files going back 5 years. It's worse than I thought. Termination decisions are mostly based on salary versus perceived value, with almost no input from people who actually work with the employees being let go. There's a pattern of cutting older workers and replacing them with cheaper recent graduates, and there's basically no consideration for non-work factors like family situations or medical issues. In other words, we've been optimizing for cost reduction without caring who we hurt in the process. That's a fair assessment. The elevator doors opened on the 7th floor, where the server room hummed behind reinforced walls. Vivian could see engineers at their stations, monitoring systems that Noah had built and maintained even when no one knew who he really was. "I want all of that changed," she said. "New review process that includes input from multiple departments, consideration for personal circumstances, and a default assumption that people are valuable unless proven otherwise. Not the other way around. That's going to slow down decision-making significantly." "Good. Fast decisions are how we ended up firing our lead architect without realizing what we were losing. Slow down, pay attention, actually think about consequences before pulling triggers." Vivian headed toward the server room, Marcus trailing behind. "Is Andrew here?" "Should be. He's been running security checks all morning." They found Andrew at his usual station, surrounded by monitors showing system status in real time. He looked up as they entered, his expression wary. "Vivian, Marcus, what's up?" "Noah's coming back in 2 weeks, part-time schedule, full authority on security decisions. I need you to start planning how we transition primary responsibility back to him without overwhelming him or creating gaps in coverage." Andrew's wariness shifted to something like relief. "Honestly, that's the best news I've heard all week. I'm good at what I do, but this system is beyond my expertise. I've been holding my breath every time we run an update, terrified we're going to trigger something else I don't understand." "That's exactly why we need Noah back. But I also need you to be honest with me. Are you okay with reporting to him? I know you've been acting lead since he transferred to maintenance, and now you'd be going back to a support role." Andrew considered the question, then shrugged. "I'd rather support someone who actually knows what they're doing than lead a team that's guessing half the time. Pride's not worth another crisis like Tuesday night." "Good. Then work with Noah when he starts. Learn everything you can from him, document it, build in redundancies so we're not dependent on one person's expertise. And if you hit resistance from anyone who thinks their ego is more important than system stability, send them to me." After they left the server room, Marcus pulled Vivian aside. "You're burning a lot of political capital very quickly. The board, Richard, restructuring employee reviews, Noah's contract. These are all fights that could come back to hurt you." "I know. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it because it's right. Because I almost destroyed something important through sheer arrogance, and I'm not doing that again." Vivian checked her watch. Nearly 4 p.m., which meant she'd been at the office for almost 10 hours without eating. Her stomach reminded her of this fact with an angry growl. "I'm going to grab something from the cafeteria. You want anything?" "I'm good." "But Vivian, for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is right. It's just going to cost you. Everything costs something. At least this way, the cost is worth it." The cafeteria was mostly empty, just a few stragglers from the lunch rush and early dinner crowd. Vivian grabbed a sandwich she didn't really want and sat by the windows overlooking the city. From here, she could see the neighborhood spreading out in all directions. Downtown's glass towers giving way to residential areas, industrial zones, suburbs in the distance. Millions of people living lives that intersected with Meridian systems in invisible ways. She thought about Noah and his small house, probably making dinner for Mia right now, checking medication schedules, being present for someone who needed him more than any company ever could. She thought about Dr. Kim's call, the transplant waiting list, the reality that any day could bring a phone call that changed everything. She thought about what it must be like to carry that weight while also trying to maintain a career, pay medical bills, be everything a sick kid needed while watching executives treat you like you were disposable. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia Wong. "Heard you had words with Richard. Want to grab coffee tomorrow and debrief?" Vivian typed back. "Yes. And I want to bring Noah when his schedule allows. You said you wanted to meet him." The response came quickly. "Perfect. Let me know dates." "And Vivian? Don't let Richard rattle you. He's been trying to undermine strong leaders since before you were born. The fact that you're standing up to him means you're doing something right." Vivian finished her sandwich, watching the sun move lower in the sky, thinking about leadership and strength, and the difference between standing up for principles and just being stubborn. Her phone rang again. This time it was Noah, and she could hear Mia singing something in the background. "Hey," Noah said. "Sorry to bother you, but Mia had a question and I figured you'd be better at answering than me." "What's the question?" "She wants to know if the place where Daddy's going to work has a garden. Apparently she's decided that all important buildings should have gardens. Vivienne felt herself smile for the first time all day. Tell her we have a rooftop terrace on the 35th floor with benches and plants and a pretty good view of the park. Not exactly a garden, but close. She heard Noah relay this information, heard Mia's excited response, heard the warmth in Noah's voice as he talked to his daughter about visiting Daddy's new workplace. She says that's acceptable, Noah reported. She also wants to know if you like grilled cheese, because apparently that's her metric for judging people now. I love grilled cheese. Tell her it's one of my top 5 foods. Top 5? What are the other 4? I have no idea. I just said that to impress a 7-year-old. Noah laughed, genuine and unguarded. Well, it worked. You've been officially approved by the Grilled Cheese Council. Congratulations. They talked for a few more minutes about logistics, contract details, start dates. But underneath the practical conversation, Vivienne heard something shifting. Not quite trust yet, but maybe the possibility of it. The sense that this might actually work, that they might actually be able to build something different. After they hung up, Vivienne sat in the empty cafeteria watching the city lights start to glow as evening settled in. Tomorrow would bring more fights with Richard, more resistance to change, more complications she couldn't predict. But tonight, she'd made progress. Small, imperfect progress that wouldn't show up in any quarterly report, but mattered more than most things that did. She gathered her trash, threw it away, and headed back to her office to keep working on changes that would outlast her tenure and hopefully make Meridian into the kind of company that deserved someone like Noah Bennett. The kind of company that saw people instead of positions, expertise instead of job titles, human beings instead of line items to be optimized. It was late when she finally left the building, the city quiet around her, stars barely visible through the light pollution. Vivienne drove home slowly, too tired to rush, thinking about 7-year-olds who judged people by their grilled cheese preferences and fathers who built genius-level security systems while carrying the weight of impossible choices. Tomorrow she'd keep fighting. Tonight, she just needed to rest. Her phone buzzed one last time as she pulled into her building's garage. Another text from Noah. Mia says thank you for having a garden. She's drawing you a picture of it. Fair warning, it involves a lot of purple flowers and at least 3 unicorns. Vivienne typed back. Can't wait to see it. Tell her I'll hang it in my office. The response came quickly. She'll hold you to that. Good, Vivienne thought. Someone should. 2 weeks passed in a blur of contract negotiations, board meetings, and small changes that felt both monumental and insufficient. Vivienne found herself doing things she'd never done before, sitting in on employee reviews to understand how decisions actually got made, eating lunch in the cafeteria instead of her office, learning the names of people who'd been working at Meridian for years without her noticing they existed. It was uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit, breaking in leather that resisted every step. Marcus appeared in her office doorway on Friday afternoon, the day before Noah's official start date. Mia's picture arrived. He held up a manila envelope. Courier delivered it an hour ago. Vivienne took the envelope, feeling the slight weight of construction paper inside. She opened it carefully and pulled out a drawing that was exactly what Noah had promised. Purple flowers everywhere, 3 unicorns with rainbow manes, and a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought skyscrapers should be friendlier. At the top, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, for Ms. Vivienne, thank you for the garden. Love, Mia. Something in Vivienne's chest tightened. She'd received awards, commendations, plaques commemorating achievements that were supposed to matter. None of them had ever felt like this. Frame it, she told Marcus. I want it on the wall behind my desk where I can see it during meetings. You're serious. Completely. If board members have a problem with a kid's drawing hanging in the CEO's office, they can add it to their list of complaints about my leadership decisions. Marcus smiled, taking the picture. I'll have it framed by Monday. After he left, Vivienne stood at her window looking out at the city, thinking about how much had changed in 2 weeks and how much still needed to change. The employee review process was being overhauled, but it would take months to implement fully. The technical advisory board was in formation, but finding the right people and getting them to trust the process would take time. And Richard Caldwell was still Richard Caldwell, looking for any opportunity to undermine what she was trying to build. Progress felt slow and fragile and entirely insufficient. Her phone rang. Noah. Hey. Just wanted to give you a heads up. We're running about 20 minutes late. Mia's doctor appointment went long. Take your time. There's no rush. You sure? I know we said 10 a.m. for the walkthrough. Noah, it's fine. Get here when you get here. I'll be in my office. She heard him exhale, that particular sound of someone who'd spent years expecting flexibility to be punished. Okay, thanks. We'll be there soon. They arrived at 10:30, Noah looking harried and apologetic, Mia holding his hand and staring up at the building with wide eyes. Vivienne met them in the lobby, deliberately casual in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual executive armor. Mia looked small next to her father, wearing a purple dress that matched the flowers in her drawing and sneakers with cartoon characters on them. You must be Mia. Vivienne crouched down to the girl's level. I loved your picture. It's getting framed right now so I can hang it in my office. Mia's face lit up. Really? You're really going to hang it? Really, really. I need something to remind me that buildings should have gardens and unicorns should be involved in all major business decisions. I told Daddy unicorns make everything better, but he said you can't put them in computers. Your daddy's probably right about that, but we can definitely put them on walls. Vivienne straightened up, looking at Noah. Ready for the tour? As ready as I'll ever be. They started in the lobby, Vivienne explaining the building's layout while Mia asked questions about everything. Why the elevators had mirrors, where the fountain water went, if the security guards ever got to arrest bad guys like in movies. Noah looked tense, his hand firmly holding Mia's, scanning everything with the particular attention of someone mapping out emergency exits and calculating how fast he could get his daughter out if something went wrong. Relax, Vivienne said quietly as they waited for the elevator. This is just a walkthrough, not a performance review. Hard to relax when I spent 3 years invisible and now suddenly everyone's going to be watching. Not everyone, just the people who matter. And Mia, obviously, who's the real boss here. Mia tugged on Vivienne's sleeve. Are you the boss? I'm supposed to be, but honestly, I'm still figuring out what that actually means. They rode up to the 7th floor first, where Andrew and Sarah were waiting by the server room. Both of them smiled when they saw Noah, genuine welcome that seemed to ease some of his tension. Bennett, good to have you back. Andrew extended his hand. And this must be Mia. Hi. Mia looked at the server room's reinforced door with interest. Is that where the robots live? Sort of. They're computer robots, not walking around robots. Want to see? Noah looked at Vivienne, uncertain. She nodded. Inside the server room, Mia's eyes went wide at the rows of equipment, the blinking lights, the quiet hum of machines processing information she couldn't begin to understand. Sarah pulled up a chair so Mia could see one of the monitors, explaining in simple terms what the numbers meant. This is what your dad built, Sarah said. All these systems talking to each other, protecting important information, making sure everything works the way it's supposed to. He's kind of a genius. Mia looked at Noah with obvious pride. My daddy's the smartest. Yeah, Sarah agreed. He really is. Noah's expression did something complicated. Embarrassment mixed with gratitude, mixed with the particular vulnerability of having the two parts of his life intersect. He'd kept them separate for so long, work and family existing in parallel universes that never touched. Now they were colliding, and he looked like someone bracing for impact. But the impact didn't come. Instead, Andrew showed Mia how to make the system run diagnostic tests, letting her press buttons that made colors change on the screen. Sarah explained what different alerts meant, turning complex security protocols into a game that made Mia laugh. And Noah stood there watching, slowly uncoiling, letting himself believe that maybe this could actually work. After 20 minutes, they moved on to the 35th floor, where the rooftop terrace waited behind glass doors. Mia ran ahead, pressing her face against the glass to look at the plants and benches outside. Can we go out there? Of course. Vivienne opened the door, and Mia burst through like she'd been released from captivity, running to examine every plant, every flower, declaring which ones met her approval and which ones needed improvement. Noah followed more slowly, standing at the terrace edge and looking out at the city spreading below. From here you could see the park, the river cutting through downtown, neighborhoods stacking up against each other in layers of concrete and ambition. This is where you can come when it gets overwhelming, Vivienne said, joining him at the railing. When the meetings are too much, or Richard's being an ass, or you just need space to breathe. No one will bother you up here. You're really trying to make this work. I'm really trying not to screw it up again. Noah was quiet for a moment, watching Mia investigate a planter full of herbs. Dr. Kim called you. She did. Told me about the transplant. I was going to tell you eventually, just didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding like I was leveraging my daughter's condition for better terms. It's not leverage, it's reality. Vivian turned to face him. And the contract reflects that. Extended medical leave, no questions asked, full salary, and benefits continuation however long you need. When Mia gets her transplant, you focus on her. Everything else waits. You keep saying when, not if, because it's going to happen. She's going to get her transplant, you're going to be there for every second of it, and then she's going to recover and live a normal life. That's not optimism, it's just refusing to accept any other outcome. Noah looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You barely know us. I know enough. I know you built something brilliant while carrying impossible weight. I know your daughter judges people by their grilled cheese preferences and thinks unicorns make everything better. And I know that if Meridian can't accommodate the reality of your life, then Meridian doesn't deserve you. Vivian paused. Also, Dr. Kim told me you haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years, so that's changing too. You've got 4 weeks paid time off, and I want you to actually use it. 4 weeks that's a lot. It's what you should have had all along with respect, decent pay, and people who listened when you tried to warn them about disasters. She watched Mia, who was now trying to convince a butterfly to land on her finger. I can't give you back the 3 years we wasted, but I can make sure the next 3 years are different. Why does this matter so much to you? It was the same question he'd asked before, but the answer felt clearer now. Because I looked at spreadsheets for so long, I forgot they represented actual people. Because firing you was easy, and easy shouldn't have been possible. Because Vivian struggled for words that captured something she was still figuring out. Because watching you choose your daughter over everything else reminded me that there are things more important than quarterly earnings. And I spent a decade forgetting that. Mia ran over, breathless and excited. Daddy, there's rosemary. Can we make chicken with rosemary tonight? Sure, baby. We can make whatever you want. And can Miss Vivian come? She should try our cooking. Noah looked mortified. Mia, Miss Sterling is very busy. Actually, I'm free tonight. The words came out before Vivian had fully processed them. If the invitation's real, I'd love to come. Mia beamed. Noah looked uncertain but didn't object. Okay, yeah. Dinner? Around 6:30? He gave her his address, like she hadn't already driven there in the middle of the night 2 weeks ago. Fair warning, it's going to be chaos. Mia's idea of helping in the kitchen involves more enthusiasm than actual skill. Sounds perfect. They finished the tour, hitting the cafeteria where Mia declared the grilled cheese acceptable, but not as good as Daddy's, then circling back to the 7th floor so Noah could look at his new workspace. It was one of the corner offices, windows on 2 sides, enough room for the kind of custom setup he preferred. This is too much, Noah said, looking at the space that was easily 3 times the size of what most architects got. It's appropriate. You're chief security architect with final authority on critical systems. You need space to work. Vivian leaned against the doorframe. Also, there's a couch that folds out if you ever need to crash here during long projects, and the mini fridge is fully stocked. Marcus's orders. Marcus is in on this too? Marcus has been in on this since the night we almost lost everything. Turns out he's got opinions about how we treat employees, and he's not shy about sharing them. Noah walked around the office, running his hand along the desk, testing the chair, looking out the windows at the city below. Mia climbed onto the couch, declaring it the best couch she'd ever seen, and immediately curling up like she planned to live there. I can really start part-time, Noah asked. 3 days a week, mornings free for Mia's appointments, work from home when she's having bad days. You can start however you need to start. We adjust to you, not the other way around. And if Richard pushes back, then Richard learns what it's like to lose a fight with someone who's stopped caring about his approval. Vivian checked her watch. Almost noon, which meant the board meeting she'd been dreading was in an hour. I should go, but Noah, Monday morning, whenever you get here, you're going to have people who are genuinely happy you're back. Not because they need you to fix things, but because they actually respect what you do. Try to let yourself believe that. I'll try. She left them there, father and daughter in an office that represented a second chance neither of them should have needed in the first place. The elevator ride down felt different somehow, like the building itself had shifted into something less sterile, more human. Marcus met her outside the boardroom with coffee and a grim expression. Richard's been rallying votes. He's going to push for a review of Noah's contract terms. Let him push. Vivian, he's got Harrison and at least two others backing him. If they force a vote, then they force a vote and I deal with it. But I'm done negotiating basic human decency with people who see everything as a zero-sum game. She took the coffee, burning her tongue again. How do I look? Like someone about to start a fight she's not sure she can win. Good, that's accurate. The boardroom was full when she entered, all 9 members present and looking various degrees of supportive, skeptical, or openly hostile. Richard sat at his usual spot, papers arranged in neat stacks, the picture of a man who'd done his homework and was ready to demonstrate everyone else's incompetence. Vivian, thank you for joining us. His tone suggested she was late, even though she was exactly on time. I think we all want to discuss this contract you've negotiated with Mr. Bennett. Sure, what would you like to discuss? Let's start with the part-time arrangement. You're proposing to pay him $400,000 annually for what amounts to roughly 20 hours of work per week. That's an effective hourly rate of almost $400, which is substantially above market value for his position. His position is irreplaceable. Market value doesn't apply. Everything is replaceable, Vivian. That's basic business principle. Patricia Wong cleared her throat. Actually, Richard, I had lunch with Noah Bennett yesterday. Just the two of us. Casual conversation about his work. And I have to say, Vivian's right. What he built isn't just good, it's extraordinary. I brought in 2 external consultants to review his code independently, and both of them said the same thing. We're looking at security architecture that's 5 to 10 years ahead of industry standard. Richard's expression tightened. You brought in consultants without board approval? I brought in consultants using my own money to verify whether this company was about to make a $400,000 mistake. Turns out, we're not. If anything, we're getting a bargain. Patricia pulled out her tablet, displaying something on the main screen. This is the cost analysis of what it would take to rebuild Bennett's systems from scratch if we lost him permanently. We're looking at 18 to 24 months of development time, teams of engineers, and a price tag somewhere north of $15 million. And that's assuming we could even replicate what he built, which my consultants strongly doubt. Harrison Kim leaned forward, studying the numbers. 15 million? Conservative estimate. Could be higher depending on complications. Patricia looked at Richard. So yes, 400,000 for part-time work seems expensive until you compare it to the alternative. Then it starts looking like the smart play. What about the medical leave provisions? Richard wasn't giving up. Open-ended leave with full salary continuation? That's unprecedented. It's compassionate, another board member said. Jennifer Okafor, who usually stayed quiet during these fights. His daughter needs a heart transplant. Are we really going to nickel and dime him over medical leave? It's not about nickel and diming, it's about setting precedent. If we do this for Bennett, every employee is going to expect the same treatment. Good. Vivian set down her coffee, meeting Richard's eyes. Let them expect it. Let them expect that if they're dealing with sick family members, this company will support them instead of treating them like liabilities. Let them expect that expertise gets rewarded and personal circumstances get accommodated. Those are good precedents. Those are expensive precedents that will impact our bottom line. You know what impacts our bottom line? Security breaches that expose classified data and destroy client confidence. Losing talented people because we're too cheap to treat them like human beings. Spending $15 million rebuilding systems we already have because we fired the person who built them. Vivian stood up, too agitated to sit. I'm done optimizing for short-term profits at the expense of long-term stability. And if that's unacceptable to this board, then vote me out and find someone who will go back to the old way of doing things. But know that when you do, you're also going to lose Noah Bennett, and probably half the talented people in this building who are watching to see if this company actually means what it says about valuing employees. The room went quiet. Richard looked around, clearly calculating votes, trying to determine if he had the numbers to force a change. Patricia spoke first. I vote to approve the contract as written. Full terms, no modifications. Jennifer nodded. Seconded. Harrison surprised everyone. I'm uncomfortable with the precedent, but I'm more uncomfortable with the alternative. Approved.
One by one, the votes came in. 7-2, the same margin as before. Richard and one other holdout against, everyone else recognizing that this fight wasn't worth winning. Richard stood up, gathering his papers with sharp, angry movements. This is a mistake. And when it becomes clear that you're throwing money at problems that require actual leadership to solve, I'll be here to say I told you so. I'll mark my calendar. Vivian didn't bother hiding her contempt. Meeting adjourned.
After everyone else filed out, Patricia lingered. That was well done. Risky, but well done. Didn't feel like I had much choice.
You always have a choice.
You chose to fight for something that mattered instead of compromising on something that shouldn't be negotiable. That's leadership. Patricia headed for the door, then paused. Also, for what it's worth, I really do think Bennett's brilliant, and his daughter is adorable. She told me all about the unicorns that should be in our security protocols. Did she convince you? I'm considering it. Vivian spent the rest of the afternoon dealing with paperwork and emails and all the mundane tasks that made up corporate leadership when you weren't fighting battles about basic humanity. At 5:30, she shut down her computer and headed home to change before dinner at Noah's house. She'd never been nervous about a dinner invitation before, but this felt different. This wasn't a business meal or a networking event. This was walking into someone's actual life. The private space where Noah and Mia existed, independent of Meridian and corporate politics, and all the complications that came with her title. She changed 3 times before settling on jeans and a casual shirt, nothing that screamed CEO or tried too hard. Then she stopped at a bakery and picked up dessert, chocolate cake that the woman behind the counter promised was a kid favorite. Noah's neighborhood looked different in early evening light, less worn down and more lived in. Kids were playing in yards, someone was grilling something that smelled amazing, and the whole street had the particular energy of people finishing workdays and settling into the parts of life that actually mattered. She knocked on the door at 6:25, heard Mia shout, "I'll get it," and then watched through the window as Noah intercepted his daughter before she could open the door without checking who it was first. Safety rules, baby. Always check. But it's Ms. Vivian. I can see her through the window. Still check. Noah opened the door, looking more relaxed than Vivian had ever seen him. No backpack, no exhaustion weighing down his shoulders, just a dad in his own home wearing an apron that said "Dad Jokes Loading" and holding a wooden spoon. "You came. You invited me. Also, I brought cake." "Chocolate?" Mia peered around her father's legs. "Of course chocolate. What other kind is there?" "I like you." Mia grabbed Vivian's hand and pulled her inside. "Come see what we're making." The house smelled like rosemary and garlic, and something baking that made Vivian's stomach growl. The kitchen was small but organized with the particular precision of someone who'd spent years managing medical equipment alongside cooking supplies. Mia's artwork covered the refrigerator. Medication schedules were taped to the wall next to recipes, and everything spoke of a life built around necessity and love in equal measure. Rosemary chicken, roasted vegetables, and Mia's famous mashed potatoes, Noah announced. Famous meaning she mashes them and I do everything else. "I'm very good at mashing," Mia demonstrated with a masher that was slightly too big for her hands. "Daddy says I'm the best masher in the house." Daddy's right. They cooked together, or rather Noah cooked while Mia mashed and Vivian tried to help without getting in the way. It was chaotic and warm, and nothing like the catered meals she usually had delivered to her office. At one point, Mia got potato on Vivian's shirt and looked horrified until Vivian laughed and declared it an improvement. Dinner happened at a small table where the chairs didn't quite match, and the plates were mismatched too, but the food was incredible. Noah had clearly learned to cook out of necessity, but somewhere along the way it had become something more, a way to care for his daughter, to create normalcy in a life that had been disrupted by loss and illness and impossible choices. "This is amazing," Vivian said around a mouthful of chicken. "Seriously, this is better than half the restaurants I've been to. Daddy's the best cook." Mia had mashed potatoes on her face. "He makes everything good." "That's because you're easy to impress." But Noah was smiling, clearly pleased. They talked about normal things, Mia's school, her favorite books, a funny thing that happened at the doctor's office. Nothing about work or contracts or board meetings, just dinner conversation in a house where people actually lived instead of just sleeping between shifts. After dinner, Mia insisted on showing Vivian her room, which was exactly what you'd expect from a 7-year-old who liked purple and unicorns and had strong opinions about how furniture should be arranged. Medical equipment sat in the corner, portable monitors, medication supplies, the infrastructure of chronic illness made as unobtrusive as possible. I have to take medicine every day, Mia explained matter-of-factly, but Daddy makes it not scary. He does voices for the pills sometimes. Voices? Different pills have different personalities. It's ridiculous. Noah stood in the doorway, watching his daughter with obvious affection. But it works. The blue one is grumpy but nice, Mia continued, and the white one thinks it's very important. Vivian felt something in her chest ache, watching this father make medication routines into games so his daughter wouldn't be scared, building normalcy out of circumstances that were anything but normal. After Mia went to bed, Noah and Vivian sat on the back porch with coffee, listening to the neighborhood settle into night. Thank you for coming, Noah said. Mia's been excited about it all week. She doesn't get a lot of visitors. Thank you for inviting me. This was... Vivian struggled for words that didn't sound patronizing. This was the best evening I've had in months, maybe years. Really? I would think fancy CEO dinners would be more exciting than mashed potatoes with a 7-year-old. Fancy CEO dinners are performances. This was real. She sipped her coffee, which was stronger than she usually drank, but somehow exactly right. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever regret it? Stepping away from the architect position, spending 3 years in maintenance, putting your career on hold for Mia? Noah was quiet for a long time, long enough that Vivian thought maybe she'd crossed a line. But when he finally spoke, his voice was steady. No, I don't regret it. Was it hard? Yeah, was it lonely and frustrating, and did I sometimes feel invisible? Absolutely. But Mia needed me, and being her father is the most important thing I'll ever do. Everything else is secondary. He looked at Vivian. The career will still be there, technology will keep evolving, systems will keep needing security, and I'll keep being good at what I do. But Mia's only going to be 7 once. She's only going to need me this much for a limited time. And I refuse to miss that because some company decided my title was more important than my daughter. Ipachu Patartan. That's what I got wrong, Vivian said quietly. I thought people who chose family over career were weak or uncommitted. But you're not weak, you're just clear about what actually matters. Took me a while to get there. When Emily died, I wanted to fall apart, wanted to rage at how unfair it was, how she didn't get to see Mia grow up, how I was left trying to be both parents to a sick kid while also maintaining a career that demanded everything. Noah stared into his coffee. But falling apart wasn't an option, so I figured out what was necessary and let go of everything else. Turned out most of what I thought was necessary actually wasn't. The title, the prestige, the corner office. All of it. What was actually necessary was being present for Mia, keeping the lights on, making sure she felt safe and loved. Everything else was negotiable. He smiled slightly. Though I'll admit the salary you're offering makes the necessary things a lot easier to manage. Good. That's what it's supposed to do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear through the light pollution, listening to the city hum in the distance. I'm going to screw this up sometimes, Vivian said finally. The new policies, the employee reviews, treating people like they matter. I'm going to default to old habits and make decisions based on spreadsheets and forget that numbers represent actual humans with actual lives. It's going to happen. Probably. But I'm going to keep trying, keep pushing, keep questioning, keep fighting with Richard Caldwell about basic human decency until either he gets it or I get fired. My money's on you getting fired first. Richard seems exceptionally resistant to personal growth. Fair assessment. Vivian set down her coffee. But even if I do get fired, the precedent exists now. The contract's approved, the new policies are in motion, and other people at Meridian saw that you can push back against corporate bullshit and sometimes win. That's worth something. It's worth a lot. Noah looked at her. You know, when you fired me, I thought you were just another executive who didn't see past job titles. But you're not. You're someone who made a mistake and actually tried to fix it instead of justifying why it wasn't really a mistake. That's rare. It shouldn't be rare, it should be standard. Should be and is are different things. But you're trying to close that gap, and that counts. Vivienne left around 9:30 after promising Mia she'd come back for dinner again soon and receiving a hug that felt like absolution for sins she was still cataloging. Driving home through empty streets, she thought about the past 2 weeks, the month before that, the decade of decisions that had led to Tuesday morning when she'd fired a genius without seeing him. Every choice had felt justified at the time, efficient, rational, good for the bottom line. But efficiency without humanity was just cruelty with better PR. Her phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Patricia Wong. Forgot to mention, I'm nominating you for the Industry Leadership Award. Don't argue, just accept that you're being recognized for actually changing how we think about employee value. Announcement next month. Vivian typed back, I don't deserve an award for doing what should have been standard practice. The response came quickly. That's exactly why you deserve it. Most people never question standard practice. The light turned green. Vivian drove toward her empty penthouse, thinking about awards and recognition and the difference between being celebrated for success and being acknowledged for growth. Monday morning came bright and cold, the kind of early spring day that couldn't decide between winter and something gentler. Vivian arrived at Meridian at 7:30, earlier than necessary, unable to sleep through anticipation of Noah's first official day back. Marcus had hung Mia's drawing exactly where Vivian requested, behind her desk, centered and lit so the purple flowers and rainbow unicorns were the first thing people saw when they entered her office. It looked ridiculous and perfect and exactly right. At 9:15, she got a text from Noah. Mia's medication ran late. We'll be there by 10. Sorry. She typed back, no apology necessary. See you when you get here. He arrived at 10:07 with Mia in tow, both of them slightly windblown and apologetic. But this time, people were waiting. Andrew and Sarah from the security team, Marcus with a welcome packet, even a few engineers who'd worked with Noah years ago and wanted to say they were glad he was back. And they were genuinely glad. Not relieved they had someone to fix their problems, but happy to see a colleague they respected getting recognition he deserved. Mia held court in this cafeteria, charming everyone with her opinions about grilled cheese quality, and her insistence that all security systems should include at least one unicorn protocol. Noah looked uncomfortable with the attention, but gradually relaxed as people engaged with him like he mattered, like his expertise was valued, like the past 3 years of invisibility were being actively corrected. Vivian watched from a distance, letting it happen without interfering. This wasn't about her. This was about Meridian becoming the kind of place where people were seen, where expertise was respected regardless of title, where a father could prioritize his daughter without being punished for it. Around 11, Noah found her in her office, Mia having been collected by Marcus for a promised tour of the building's secret cool places. This is overwhelming, he said. Good overwhelming or bad overwhelming? Mostly good, little bit terrifying. Everyone's being so nice, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. No shoe. Just people who are genuinely happy you're here. Vivian gestured to the chair across from her desk. How are you feeling about everything? Honestly, cautiously optimistic, which is more than I expected to feel. Noah sat down, his eyes catching on Mia's drawing behind Vivian. You actually hung it. Told you I would. It's the best thing on these walls. It's a 7-year-old's crayon drawing next to your business awards. Exactly. Priorities. Vivian leaned back in her chair. So, here's how I'm thinking this works. You spend this week getting oriented, reconnecting with the systems, identifying what needs attention. No pressure to fix everything immediately. No expectations that you'll work miracles overnight. Just ease back in. And if I need to leave early because Mia has an appointment, then you leave early. We've been over this, Noah. Your schedule is your schedule. We accommodate it. I'm going to take time to get used to that. I know, but we'll keep saying it until you believe it. He nodded slowly, some tension releasing from his shoulders. Okay. Yeah. I can work with this. The week unfolded in small adjustments and gradual shifts. Noah settled into his office, setting up his custom equipment, reconnecting with code he'd written years ago. Mia came by twice more, once for lunch, and once because she forgot her medication at home, and Noah needed to run it to her school. Both times, people made space for it, adjusted schedules, treated it like the normal reality of life intersecting with work. Richard Caldwell stayed conspicuously absent, which Vivian took as either sulking or regrouping for another fight. She'd deal with him when necessary. For now, she focused on implementation, rolling out the new employee review process, establishing the technical advisory board, making sure the changes she'd promised actually happened instead of dying in committee. It was harder than she expected. People resisted, questioned, pushed back against processes that required more time and attention than quick executive decisions. But Vivian kept pushing, kept explaining, kept pointing to Noah's return as proof that slowing down and paying attention yielded better results than efficiency at all costs. On Friday afternoon, she found herself back on the 35th floor terrace, looking out at the city and thinking about the distance between who she'd been 3 weeks ago and who she was trying to become. "Thought I'd find you here." Noah's voice came from behind her. "Mia wanted me to give you this." He handed her another drawing, this one showing two figures, one tall with dark hair labeled Ms. Vivian, one small with purple dress labeled Me, standing in a garden with unicorns. "She says you're friends now," Noah explained. "Friends get pictures." Vivian felt something warm settle in her chest, different from professional satisfaction or career achievement, something simpler and more valuable. "Tell her I'll treasure it." "You can tell her yourself. She's downstairs with Marcus planning something that probably involves glitter and possibly violates several building codes." They stood together at the railing, watching the city move and shift below. "How's your first week been?" Vivian asked. "Strange. Good strange, mostly. I keep expecting someone to tell me I don't belong here, that I should go back to maintenance where I'm not in anyone's way. But it hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. You belong here. You always did. We just finally recognized it." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything. I wasn't sure I wanted to come back. Even with the salary, the flexibility, all of it, I wasn't sure it was worth reopening that door. Because working here before, being invisible, watching people dismiss what I built, that hurt. More than I wanted to admit." "I'm sorry." "I know you are. But here's the thing. You're not just sorry. You're different. The company's different. And maybe that matters more than the apology." He turned to face her. "I'm not saying everything's perfect. Richard's still Richard, and there are probably going to be fights ahead. But for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm being seen. Like my expertise matters. Like my daughter matters. Like I matter as a complete person instead of just a function." "You do matter. Both of you." "Yeah, I'm starting to believe that." They went back downstairs together, finding Mia and Marcus in the cafeteria surrounded by what did indeed appear to be a glitter-based art project of questionable structural integrity. "We're making a thank you card for everyone who was nice this week," Mia explained. "Marcus says we have to thank them properly." Marcus is right. Vivian crouched down to examine the card, which featured approximately 3 pounds of glitter and multiple unicorns. "This is beautiful." "It's going to shed glitter for the next 6 months," Noah muttered. But he was smiling. That evening, Vivian stayed late finishing paperwork, working through policy revisions, responding to emails from board members who wanted updates on implementation progress. Standard CEO work, the kind that usually consumed her attention completely. But she kept thinking about Noah and Mia, about the glitter card and the purple flowers, and the simple act of being seen. Around 8, her phone rang. "Patricia Wong. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The Leadership Award announcement is going out tomorrow morning. Press release, industry publications, the whole thing." "I thought you said next month." "I said announcement next month. I didn't say which day." Patricia sounded amused. "Don't worry. The write-up focuses on the policy changes and employee value initiatives, not the dramatic firing and rehiring story. Though that story is significantly more interesting. The story is embarrassing. The story is human. You made a mistake, recognized it, and fixed it. That's leadership." Patricia paused. "How's Bennett working out?" "Good. Really good, actually. He's settling in, the team respects him, and Mia's been charming everyone into submission with her unicorn agenda." "Excellent. Keep me updated. And Vivian, you should be proud of what you're building here. It's not easy, and it's not always going to work perfectly, but it matters." After they hung up, Vivian sat in her office looking at Mia's drawing, thinking about pride and achievement and the difference between being celebrated for success and being acknowledged for trying to be better. The award didn't matter. The recognition was nice, but ultimately irrelevant. What mattered was Monday morning, when Noah would come in and work on systems he'd built, supported by people who valued him, with the freedom to leave early for his daughter without fear. What mattered was this precedent they'd set, that employees were people first, that expertise deserved respect regardless of title, that choosing family over career wasn't weakness, but clarity about what actually mattered. What mattered was the distance they'd traveled from Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago, when Vivian had fired a genius without seeing him, to today, when that same genius was building security systems while his daughter drew unicorns in the cafeteria. Progress wasn't smooth or easy or guaranteed to last. Richard would keep fighting, complications would arise, and there would be moments when old habits tried to reassert themselves. But the direction was right, and for now, that was enough. Vivian shut down her computer, gathered her things, and headed home through city streets that looked different somehow. Less like territories to conquer and more like neighborhoods where people lived actual lives. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from Noah. Mia wanted me to tell you goodnight. She says friends always say goodnight. Also, she's decided you need a unicorn for your desk and she's working on it. Prepare yourself. Vivian smiled, typing back, tell her goodnight and tell her I can't wait to see the unicorn. The response came quickly. She says it's going to be purple. Obviously, Vivian thought. She drove through this quiet city, past buildings where people made decisions that affected lives they never saw, past neighborhoods where kids drew pictures and fathers made medication routines into games, and the actual work of living happened independent of quarterly projections. And she thought about spreadsheets that represented people, about titles that didn't define worth, about the small human moments that mattered more than any award or recognition or board approval. She thought about a 7-year-old who judged people by their grilled cheese preferences and believed unicorns made everything better. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, the kid was onto something.